Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll probably make a start. I think if the stragglers will join us as they wander in. You may want to, can we have the music off? If it's off, it's off. Marvellous, thank you very much. This event is being live streamed, so be careful of language and other things like that, and it is a Sunday afternoon pre-watershed. There will be photographers taking a few photographs, I think, for beer necessities. If anybody has any burning ambition not to appear in a photograph, then please let us know beforehand, or duck when he comes around with the camera. Other than that, let's have a lot of engagement. Enjoy yourself this afternoon, and thank you for coming along to my second annual UK Beer Debate. I hosted the event last year, or chaired the event last year in the other part of Cardiff, and it's good to be back. We had quite a lively discussion last year, and some excellent contributions from the floor, and I'm hoping for the same this afternoon. I prepared reams and reams of notes last year and never got to use any of them, so I prepared very little this year, and hoping for much more engagement from you guys and these guys who are the experts, ladies and gentlemen, who will give you their opinions, which are what matter, not me. So to introduce you to the panel, as if they need introducing, you'll have seen their names, but let's put a face to those names. On my far left is Chris Stearmond, who is a publican of an award-winning pub in Macclesfield, The Wharf. It is former champion pub of Cheshire. Chris has come down from Macclesfield this morning, so treat him gently, because trains and planes and automobiles, I make that journey quite often, and it's not the nicest of journeys. Next to Chris, the instantly recognisable face, I'm sure, to all of you in the room, of Pete Brown, who is a noted author, essayist, journalist, writer, man who loves beer, author of many, many books. Of course, the most important of which is the Guide to Welsh Cider and Perry, of course, which is the one which surely outsold all of the rest immensely. I was about to wish Peter a happy birthday for Tuesday, as I had a brief look at his Wikipedia page this morning, but he tells me his birthday is actually in July, so that proves, I guess, that you should never believe anything you read. You shouldn't believe anything you read on Wikipedia, as Boris Johnson will tell you from the last week, I think. Then to my immediate left is Julian Growcock, who is the ex-chief executive of SIBA. And Julian has a long history with beer, I think, and he once made the quote that his ex-wife accused him of loving Tetley Bitter more than he loved her, and he said he found it hard to disagree. So Julian has a long relationship with beer, we guess. He tells me he still speaks to his ex-wife. With the ex-wife. To my immediate right is Nick Antona, who is a member of CAMRA's National Executive. And on that National Executive, his responsibility is for beer festivals. But he also sits on groups that deal with the champion beer of Britain, and marketing and technical advisory. So Nick has made the journey down again this morning as well, and is here. And I'm sure we'll have lots of questions for Nick as well from the floor. To further right along is Jen Merrick, who of course I think was due to join us last year and was delayed by many problems, and we rather cruelly put a cask of beer, I think, in the place, and that was nothing to do with me. Jen, a keg, we put a keg. Jen, as you know, is the ex-head brewer at Beavertown and many other things at Beavertown. She was the Brewer of the Year, as voted by the British Guild of Beer Writers in 2015. Jen is now a brewery consultant, I think in the process of also setting up a new brewery as well, and perhaps we can hear more about that as the day develops. And then on my far right, geographically rather than politically, I should add, is Wilf Nelson, who is the MD at Salopian Brewery, which, like all good things, started off as a Welsh brewery, Snowdonia Brewery, and relocated. I'm not sure whether that was so that they could shoot Welshmen at midnight in the castle walls with a crossbow, but relocated to Shrewsbury, and from a small 2-barrel plant, I think it's up to around 50 barrel plant in 2014, and maybe larger now, I don't know. There we go. And he are also, again, very, very involved with SEBA in Wales and the West. That's our panel. You guys are integral to today. I'm just here to make sure that order is kept and that we run to time. And that's where I kind of step back a little bit. You had sort of 2 teaser questions, I guess, on the event page, and the first of which perhaps we want to kick off with, and I'll ask the panel to give me their sort of brief thoughts on this, was kind of what the heck are all these new beer styles about? Does anyone actually care whether the beer they're drinking comes from a cask or a keg or a bottle or a can? Does it matter? It was interesting, as a side point, that some Nielsen research published last week said that canned beers now make up a quarter of the craft beer market in the UK. Canned craft beer sales increased by 327% in the first half of 2017. So does it matter? Does it matter what beer we're drinking and where it comes from? Pete?
Are we looking at those 2 together, or?
I think yeah, I think so.
All that matters at the end of the day is if you enjoy it or not. I think styles in particular are something which I've seen obsessed about. When you judge different beer competitions, you judge some which will ask you, well, do you like the beer? Would you want to drink some of it? Would you order another pint of it if you finished it? You judge other competitions and like, well, you've got to mark this down if it's not to style. The famous example of that was Fuller's in London produced a very nice beer called ESB. The Americans decided that ESB wasn't the name of a beer, it was actually a style, because so many American brewers started to copy it. So they created a style in one of the competitions. I think it was the Beer World Cup, it might have been another one. And they based the guidelines for the style on Fuller's ESB, because that was the only beer that there was to base it on. 2 years later, Fuller's entered Fuller's ESB into that competition, and it was rejected for not being to style. So, you know, if you're going to use styles as kind of... There's that old thing about using a lamppost like a drunk for illumination rather than support, or that kind of thing. You know, styles are useful benchmarks in the ground. When you start obsessing over whether this is to style or not, I think it descends into kind of, you know, dancing on a pinhead. And also, when I try to write quite a lot of stuff to a general audience rather than a beer audience, when you start obsessing about these kind of questions, this is where you see the light go off in people's eyes. They're curious about beer, they want to know more. You start talking about all this kind of detail and they just go, oh really? Look, I wasn't bargaining on this, I'm just going to go and have a glass of Sauvignon Blanc, thank you very much.
Chris, yeah. Customers in your pub, do they care if it comes out of a cask, a keg, a bottle or a can?
Not normally, no. It depends on... it depends. We've got... The customers that we have range in age from 18 to 96, I think is my eldest fella now. And they all like the beer that they like to drink. And it doesn't matter whether it is can or keg or whatever. There's a chap who always used to drink a stronger IPA on cask, because that's what we had available. As soon as we started selling kegged IPA, he moved on to the keg. He didn't care, as long as the product was right and it tasted well and he enjoyed it and the price wasn't to the point of it made his eyes water, he carried on drinking it. So as for bottle, well, I used to own a bottle beer shop. I opened a bottle beer shop called Beer2 in Macclesfield, which we moved from a small location which was just bottle sales through to a bigger location. We put a bar in and made it more like cafe orientated. And between bottles and keg and can, the only time we noticed was it was early on in the days with canning, and the quality of the cans weren't always to scratch. But on the flip side of it, the quality of bottles was always a little bit, you never knew what you were going to get because of the bottle conditioning. So, whereas keg, well, it was pretty much continuous. It was all, you knew what you were getting most of the time. So, for continuity of product and quality, I think that's what customers want. They want consistency. And if a pub can keep the beer consistent, whether it be keg, can, cast, whatever, customers enjoy it. And sure, that's the way it goes for the market point of view now. It's people just want to drink beer. So.
Jen, you're a brewery consultant and have worked very closely in the brewery as a champion brewer. What do you, when you talk to breweries and they may ask you questions about whether to go down the canning route, the bottle route, what's your advice to them and what do you feel about that?
A a lot of the business inquiries that I get are actually traditional brewers considering doing kegs and cans. And it makes me a bit sad. I mean, I started out in the traditional cask industry, and I came to the UK to study cask and the traditional English brewing styles. So the idea that trying to compete on that level to sort of be trendy or get a foot in the door. It also makes me sad, the idea that brewers really have to put something into small pack to go into pub fridges, when actually pubs are much better at draft. Like, it's a place that you should be able to come to experience draft beer. Whether it's on cask or on keg, it's going to be better in a draft format than to put it into a small pack just to kind of dress up someone's fridge. So whilst, if it's a cafe and maybe all it has is a fridge and it doesn't have draft lines, fine. But I'd much, much rather see pubs doing a good job of a wide range of both cask and keg formats. And, every publican knows for themselves how much cask they can turn over. Obviously, it's a format where the beer needs to turn over a bit fresher, and there's a little bit of a knack to it, and you have to keep it properly. And, there are things that are for that publican to judge about their local market. But I hope it doesn't disappear. I hope that the drinker continues to be, people accuse craft drinkers of being promiscuous. I hope that the drinker continues to be promiscuous and drink both craft and keg, because I really want to see the format persevere. And if there is any modernizing to do around getting better prices for cask, teaching publicans and customers what constitutes value in cask, I think that that's really important, because, I'm an American, you will have heard my accent. I've been here a lot of years, but what I still see in the US is a market that thinks of cask as incredibly special and niche, and, all the American pubs would give their right arm to have good, well-kept, properly brewed cask ale. They just don't have the infrastructure there. So if we let it die in Britain, I'm not sure anyone's ever going to go to the trouble to set it up again. Do you know what I mean?
Do you think there is a danger we are beginning to let it die, or?
Just because of this price wars issue, this issue of publicans or punters not being willing to pay as much for the same liquid in a different format, I think so. Yeah, I think there's an issue there that makes it a bit of a no-brainer for any new establishment to set it up as a keg-only operation, whether it's a new brewer or a new pub. So I think it's a bit tricky at the minute, really.
Pricing is definitely but from my point of view, as being a publican, I pass on the price that I'm given to my customers.
Yes.
So I think that the biggest driver of price is you need to be able to sell a product that's on the bar. So, and the cask, you need to be able to turn it over, you need to flip it out in 3 days.
And if it's a higher price,
and if it's a higher price,
yeah,
customers, their perception is they're happy to pay £3.60. Well, I'm thinking northern prices, £3.60, £3.50 for a pint of lager.
Yeah.
But they will not pay £3.50, £3.60 for a similar weight ABV pint of cask, because camera and other campaigning has led to the thought pattern that cask has to be cheap. And I think obviously that's going to bring us on to a topic with JD Weatherspoons. So
there are two components of keg that make it more costly, and one is vessel residency time, because you have to finish the beer in the brewery. And running a brewery like Beavertown, absolutely, every day that the beer was in vessel, it was costing us more beer that we could make, because we were completely maxed out. So to be able to put it into cask and send it off somewhere else to finish conditioning would have been an advantage. And the other thing is key kegs or renting kegs. If you're renting from Kegstar, or even if you're buying your own fleet of steels, they are incredibly expensive. So, I guess there are some advantages to producing beer in cask where you can get it out of vessel more quickly.
You still got the collection aspect though with cask, even if unless you use e-cask and go one-way casking.
You do.
So.
And there's a whole model of basically traditional draymanship that is a thing that modern breweries just don't take draymanship seriously. They don't think that they have to go into that place when it's open, deal with the publican, look at his face or her face. They don't think that they have to go down in the cellar and collect empties and take them out. They don't look after the details of draymanship the way that it always was traditionally
I think a
done.
highlight to that is what's recently happened. this last couple of months or so. Carlsberg have been a major dray company for years, and recently they have closed they're closing, they're in the process of closing the whole logistics operation.
Yeah.
So now Carlsberg's deliveries are being handled by, Green King have taken some on because obviously there's Punch Estate, but a lot of their Carlsberg delivery options, a lot of their draymanship is now being handled by DHL Trade Team, who have not got an absolute clue how to do drayman. They don't know about all the things you mentioned about the drops, about even down to health and safety of controlling 140 kilos of barrel as it slips down a slide. They don't get it.
Yeah.
And
the customer service element. I mean, if you're a brewer, you know that the person whose face your customer sees matters.
Yeah,
and he might be a surly fella who, you know, is just there to shift barrels, but he's still mad. You know, the person that goes around.
I've had the same dray crew pretty much on and off for 6 years now for like my principal dray delivery. And we have a good rapport. So they ring me half an hour before, they get the bacon butty when they arrive, I should call in.
That's it.
We have a laugh and a chat, they call me Harry Potter because they think it's funny. I used to have longer hair, so it's not always been short. But now you get that rapport with dray crews, and these guys know the job. And when I was away, for instance, or working at other places, and my manager was there, she wasn't able to manhandle the beers as much. They'd rack out, they'd tap in, they'd vent barrels, they'd roll kegs around, and that sort of relationship that's important. But now we're getting, now we've lost that. So,
do you find you get better service from smaller breweries on the drayman?
Yeah, normally, but it's often with my cellar. I've normally got that many empties in the way of the hatch, and when a small brewer turns up, I have to get them to leave it outside because I haven't got time to empty it out to drop the beers down. But no, the smaller breweries have got, the dray teams are a lot better. They're aware of the product, and at the end of the day, a brewery which brews the beer and delivers it themselves, they want to make sure that their brand is represented the best way they can. So they make sure the conditions are right, they make sure the drop's been done properly, they make sure the cask's looked after, and when you get it on the rack, you know it's going to have been not kept outside in 18 degrees.
There's an element there in what you're saying about what, this initial debating point is, who cares about what container that beer comes in.
Sounds quality.
From our point of view, we're 90% of what we do is still cask beer, and it is trying to make sure that it's given to the public and as good as it can be, and therefore you have to train your dray stuff. I like the use of the word surly because all our draymen are surly. You have to be surly, otherwise you can't be a drayman. In fact, when we buy a pub, it's going to be called the Surly Drayman.
When somebody comes to a job as a drayman, within 6 months they're going to be surly anyway. They're having to deal with surly, grumpy landlords all the time, so it's going to be the way.
It goes back. I mean, we're looking at spreading what we do. We're saying that 90% of what we do as cask is too much, and to look to the various reasons to do more into bottle and more into keg, and it's an interesting concept as to whether anybody cares, but I think there is a distinct difference in beer, that whether it's in cask or whether it's in
certain
keg.
styles which suit. There's certain styles which suit the container.
And it's also interesting the idea that people are not prepared. So for instance, all of the black range stuff we do, whether it goes into bottle or keg or cask, it's all the same. And so it costs us just the same to make it. It's spending anything up to a month in a tank before it goes out. But that idea that for cask you can't get as much for it as you can for keg is a big issue.
That's down to customer perception.
And is that perception? And I believe that if we could all just speak up a little bit, 'cause I think they're having difficulty hearing at the back, so apologies, but we will try and speak a little bit louder for you guys at the back. Is that perception on the price point? And it was mentioned by one of our panelists. Nick, I'll ask for your view. Does it matter to camera how the product comes? And I know your answer to that, I guess. And has the ethos of camera done its job, and is now, does camera care how good beer comes in which container?
I think we care how good the beer is on dispense. We would really prefer beer to be in a pub. I'm very much a draft. The best place to drink beer is in a pub with friends, socialising in the community. Yes, there is people out there who cannot get to the pub, so yes, we have to have different containers for those, and that can be bottled. I don't care if the beer is good. I personally don't care what comes in, and that's my personal view. I know there is a lot of people in camera who will think I've just said something really sacrilege, and well, I'll probably be castigated for it. But at the end of the day, it's the quality of the beer, and I think what we should be as an organisation, and what we are focusing on and beginning to change our direction is it's not about the price, it's about quality. And it's more important that you walk into a pub and get a good quality pint of beer, or half, and you enjoy it. And that beer is served in the best way it can be, given to you in the best way, and demonstrates what a premium product beer is.
Thank you. Julian.
Right, I will apologise before I start to speak, although I've just started to speak, so I've already disproved that. If I have any trouble with my voice, I am enjoying a nice chesty cold at the moment. Having a problem with my voice is not something I'm used to. I can usually keep going forever, but I will do my best, but please allow me that little bit of leeway. There's been a lot of issues raised already by the other panel members, which basically leaves me with about 45 minutes to sum it all up. When I bought my first Good Beer Guide, because I am the dinosaur on this panel, in 1976, there were then, I think, 85 brewing companies and 150 breweries in this country. And the Good Beer Guide summed up the beers available with 3 symbols: a white circle for bitter, a black circle for mild, and a black square with a little white circle in the middle of it for special or old ale or barley wine or something of that nature. And that effectively, can we believed at the time, summarised everything that was available. And so we have had some significant changes since then, but I was heartened to hear Jen say how important cask beer had been to her in coming over here, because it's this cross-pollination that has happened, especially between the UK and the US, where the Americans, who had a completely different style of beer industry before their craft revolution, in that there weren't any little companies left at all, completely different to what was happening in this country. And so they created a completely new industry, whereas over here, what we've done is kind of graft onto the existing, so that we now do have a much wider variety of beers. We have innovation, we have experimentation, most of which I welcome. In fact, if there is a mentholyptus beer available today, brewed by an artisan, I'd be more than happy to give it a try. The issue of quality has already been raised, and it's going to be raised again. It's about the quality at the point of getting the drink as the customer. And of course, it has been a long battle that real ale campaigners have had to fight. I've been privileged to have been in charge of 4 pubs during the course of my career. The very first pub I managed was a Marston's Tied House, and just harkening back to the idea of the drayman and the surly drayman, they always used to get a drink, of course, in those days. And in my Marston's Tied House, we sold Old Roger barley wine, and we sold Stella. Only one person ever had that as a mixed drink, and that was one of the Marston's draymen. I don't think he was the driver, but because Old Roger was pretty rare even in Marston's pubs, he took the opportunity to have it, but he did like it livened up a little with half a pint of Stella as well. So anyway, when I ran the last 2 pubs I've been landlord of were both in the same village, which is a little village called Hose, H-O-S-E, in the Vale of Beaver, spelt Belvoir, but definitely pronounced Beaver, so don't let me hear you say it in any other way. And the Black Horse, when I took it on in 1992, had been a home brewery, which is a Nottingham brewery, home brewery pub, and it sold bitter and mild. And it sold its bitter in 36-gallon barrels, and it sold its mild in 22s. And that was the kind of volume that a little village pub was able to achieve in those days. Incidentally, the Marston's pub that I ran in Newark, that did 7, 8, 9 36s of pedigree a week. And when I ran the Swan in the Rushes in Loughborough in the late 80s, that was doing 5 36s of Tetley Bitter and 4 36s of pedigree in a week, plus guest beers, as guest beers were beginning to appear. So the world has changed enormously. I remember particularly one customer of mine in the Black Horse, a guy called Neil, who was a mild drinker, worked on one of the local farms, was a dairyman. And when I took on the Rose and Crown in the same village about 5-6 years ago, because the Black Horse had closed and the Rose and Crown was dying on its arse and all my kids had been to the village school and I didn't like the idea of the pub failing. And so like a knight on a shining white charger, I went in to save the business. And I obviously had the freedom with a lot more real ales. A totally new experience for me. 3.5 years did a 500 cask beers. And Neil, who used to drink mild, now seeks out whatever golden ale is on sale whenever he goes in, because he's changed his drinking habits. However, his drinking habit still revolves around the pub, and it still revolves around draft beer, and it still revolves around socialising rather than standing around telling you he can detect notes of Narcissus and hints of humbug in whatever it is he's drinking. I'm not running that pub anymore. It's 2.5 years since I came out. I now live in the next village, but I go there every Friday night to have the same drinking experience with the guys I used to drink with when I was the landlord. And that, again, involves quaffing rather than sipping, draft beer, which is cask conditioned, and enjoying it immensely as a background to the experience of a social occasion, rather than making it the be-all and end-all of the social occasion. There are times to drink fascinating 7, 8, 9, 10, 11% beers. That, for me, isn't in the pub, and that's why containers, I will drink out of all different production formats. I will drink canned beer, I'll drink bottled beer, I will drink cask, I will drink keg. In the pub, it is almost always, cask, although I did revolutionarily in a village pub introduce craft keg beers while I was in the Rose and Crown. But it's such a big subject to try and sort of pin it down. All I want to say at this point, I've already spoken far too long, is that it's about, for me, the real ale issue and the cask issue and the camera issue is about tying it with the pub, which has already been hinted at. And the beer world is bigger than that and possibly hugely more interesting than that. But let's not forget, as Jen says, we don't want to lose sight of that unique style of production that we enjoy in this country, and we don't want to see it fade away on the back of we being told it's no longer important by people who don't want to drink it themselves. Okay.
On the question of being told it's no longer important or quality, Pete, you said in January you were giving up drinking cask ale because of the quality of it. What have you got with you today, and has your view changed? Is it all about the quality rather than the package?
Yeah, what I said is absolutely about the quality, and what I said in January is that I'd stopped drinking it in London, and
that's handily missing from that story.
And I did so to be provocative, and I was shocked with the swiftness and uniformity with which the cask ale industry united to absolutely tear me a new arsehole. Because cask ale is wonderful, cask ale has always been wonderful, cask ale will be wonderful, and if you say anything else, you're a class traitor to the cause, is what I learned in January. And what I got a lot of in response to that was, well, you're an expert beer writer, surely you know where to go for a good pint. It's like, well, yes, I do. Where I live in London, I will walk past 5 pubs to get to the pub that I know serves great cask, and I will drink cask ale in that pub. But where I choose to drink and what I know about is not the issue for cask. I spend my life in this industry. I've written books on pubs. I know where to go for a good beer. Cask ale, 20% of cask ale volume is sold in London, and it's sold in pretty much every half decent pub in London now. And in most of those pubs, you go in and it's shit. And people, and when I take a pint back, I say, this is not right, and I can tell you why it's not right. I can tell you that your lines aren't clean, or I can tell you it's got diacetyl, or I can tell you whatever. And the barman says, well, no one else has complained. And no, they haven't complained. The reason they haven't complained is because they're not confident enough to complain, because they're nervous, because they can't quite tell what's wrong with it. They just know that it's not right. They just know they don't like it. And what they do is they leave a pint about that full on the table. And you look around some of these pubs at 10 o'clock at night, and the tables are full of pints like that. And those people, if they ever do come back to the pub, they're certainly not coming back to the pub for a pint of cask ale. And that's why I wrote that article in the way that I did, because the industry needs to wake up to that problem. Cask ale is tanking at the moment in volume terms. I wrote the cask report for 9 years, which gave, every year I wrote it, gave accurate statistics for how cask ale was doing in terms of value and volume. In the 2 editions of the cask report that have been produced since I stopped writing it, they will not give you that information because it's so bad. And the reason it's so bad is quality. And so I was deliberately trying to give people a kick up the arse on this issue, and I was told to shut up, basically.
I'd like to add to that, if I may, and I'd like to add something that some of you may find a little controversial. Pete's absolutely right about the quality of cask beer, but one of the issues surrounding the quality of cask beer in the modern market, as opposed to us trying to get the quality right 30, 40 years ago when we were campaigning for cask beer, is that some of the, what you would call the quality or problem indicators of beer have been blurred by the craft beer market. One of the simplest ones, of course, is clarity. And haze and whatever, or the use of, or the unfined nature of beer. And one of the pubs in London where I have had one of my most disappointing experiences of cask beer is a premier craft bar at a railway station in London, which I refuse point blank to name. I was actually with the brewer, who was Eddie Gadd of Ramsgate Brewery, who you may know as having a mouth and a half on him if it comes to discussing anything. He's a great friend of mine. And we were at this pub, and his beer was a fined cask beer that should have been, therefore, clear and in good condition. And it wasn't. But the reason it was being served is because the general feeling or the general ethos or the standards of cellarmanship didn't tell the people looking after the cellar that it was wrong to serve a beer that was fined and therefore should be clear in that condition, because other beers were served like that. And so it has become an issue. And I will happily drink unfined beers if I know. Of course, it's a big indicator that the lines aren't clean if a fine cask beer is coming through hazy. And cleaning standards are something that I have been on an enormously high horse about since I took my brother down to the Isle of Wight to a famous cask beer pub that he took over for a period of time last year and spent 5 hours trying to get the beer lines clean before he opened for trade, even though that pub was in the Good Beer Guide. in 5 hours, I could not get the purple pipeline cleaner to come out purple. It was still coming out blackish green after 5 hours. And so those issues and standards, what we need is information. I would like to know on a pump clip if a beer has been fined or not, and if it should be clear. I'd love it to say on the pump clip a little symbol that says should be bright, because a publican immediately could not put that beer on sale if it came out hazy or cloudy. And I would stand by that as a publican myself. I would never put a beer on sale if it wasn't as it was meant to be. And so that's just an issue that you have to bear in mind in the way that this modern market has kind of muddied the issues.
Well, I think that comes out to the beer styles thing again, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, Wilf and I were talking earlier on about about New England IPAs. And New England style IPAs and normally looking like canal water. You won't see a light through it. Down to various things, whether it be the hopping, whether it be the wheat that it's made with, whether it be the yeasts or whatever, but it invariably is very, very murky. And a lot of the craft industry these days is a case of, oh, it's supposed to look like that because it's got hop haze, or it's supposed to look like it's unfined. But even unfined beer is one of the things I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but one of the things I've experienced in my whilst running the wharf is I always manage to get more beers from Bristol. I always manage to get drop clear. They always drop pin.
They do
right.
drop clear.
Okay, they're unfined and heavily hopped, but my God, they drop and they drop pin.
Yeah.
And
They're properly brewed, they look.
yeah, well, exactly.
Kelham
So even
Island
if-
beers used to
Kelham's-
put right, and
Well,
Dave
I've got-
Wickett would never use fine.
I've got 2 Kelhams on at the moment. I've got the Waterloo Porter, obviously you can't see through, it's black. I've got their Evil Liquid or Wicked Liquid IPA on at the moment. Pin bright, again unfined. All of more beers. Everyone always, you go to a lot of other places, especially craftier bars, and it's a case of the more beers are cloudy, hazy, whatever. Oh, it's unfined, it's supposed to be like that, it's hop haze. No, it's not. No, we put Revival on, I tell you what, it glows. It's that bright.
Can I ask you a question going back, because I think we've slightly got off the subject of what you were bringing up there. Why, in your view, who's responsible for the poor quality of the beer, of cask beer that you're drinking in pubs? In your view,
I think it's multi-stage. I mean, the issue that's come up in answer to the last question about drapemanship is something I'd never thought about before, and I tend to. I tend to ask. I think that is one issue. But before,
or is it the brew?
I think it's the publican. And I'm sure the brewer's got something to do with it as well. But depending on the brewer. But I think it's fascinating that when I've spoken to usually kind of fairly large pub chains or brewery-owned pub chains about this, they will say, look, it's not worth us. You know, there's that great thing, apparently, the famous sex pest Richard Branson supposedly said, of someone saying, well, what happens if I spend money training my staff and they leave? And he said, well, what happens if you don't train them and they stay? And there's that thing about staff training where it's the kind of dominant belief in this industry that if you train your staff, it's not worth it. They're on minimum wage, they're students, they're transition workers, and they'll just leave, and you've wasted your time on that training. 2 companies in the industry that disprove that, arguably, very arguably at the top of the bottom end of the industry, are Brewdog bars and Wetherspoons, both of whom invest heavily in training staff. And you can say what you like about Wetherspoons, that's all debate on its own. But the quality of beer, cask beer in Wetherspoons, generally, there are always exceptions, tends to be very good. And the staff and the staff in Wetherspoons tend to know what they're talking about. And Brewdog bars don't sell cask. But it's when I've got a pub near me which has got one cask champion, and he knows his cask inside out. Last bank holiday weekend, he wasn't on, and so they had 6 cask pumps and no beers on because nobody else knew how to change the fucking cask. But when you tell a member of staff that this beer's not right because it's full of diacetyl and they don't know what you're talking about, that's a problem.
Diacetyl, generally those brewers' fault, not the pubs.
But if I say, look, this is full of diacetyl, you need to take it off sale and send it back to the brewery, they're like, well, who are you to say that? You know.
Just a question from the floor at the back, Ray, I think, is it? Yep.
Some of the big breweries like Molson Coors or what they call them Sharps here, they're making cask beer to drop within an hour, okay? And some of the beer they produce in these days is fast and furious. They whack it down the cellar, they put a tap in, and an hour later they dispense in it. Is that cask conditioned beer?
No.
That's me, it isn't, because, you know, cask beer really takes maybe 24 hours to, you know, it needs settling. And the reason why the big boys are doing it is to make it easier for the landlords and the landladies to dispense cask beer really quickly. The problem is that that beer doesn't last long. Once that beer's, you know, once the oxygen's getting in there's hardly any yeast in that beer, and it's on the turn. And I'm speaking to a lot of, you know, landlords and landladies with draft bass, sharps Goomba, and they're having big problems because the beer, right, is being put straight into the cask almost bright. And they're doing that to make it easier for people. And my view on cask beer is you know, it comes out with conditioning, maybe a fermenter or conditioning tank. There's yeast in there just to keep it going a little bit. But the big boys don't care about that. They got these new cask rigid systems they brought in. I've seen Molson Coors engineers going into pubs, taking away auto tilts and putting in these shitty cask rigid things, right? And I don't rate these cask rigids. It's fast and furious again. They drop these little squiggly things on the top of the oxygenated beer, right? And I'm a big believer of water tilts and old school cask beer. And I think, right, a lot of the modern day landlords really don't know how to look after beer properly. No. And if I had a pub, all my beers would be on a water tilt or on a racking system. I certainly wouldn't be using cask rigids and listening to the Molson Coors engineers. We're trying to show these people they've never had any experience looking after cask beer and dispensing the Mickey Mouse cask beer they produce in, and that's my view on it.
It's always been the case though that every different brewery, regardless of size, in my experience, they have different handling characteristics, and Timothy Taylor's always had a damn sight more sediment in it than any other.
You just have to knock the bottom of the barrel.
You know, and if you were trying to do Timothy Taylor's in small containers in a small cellar, then the best way to get it ready as quickly as possible was to take the whole bloody shive out to give it a chance to calm down a little bit before you started to sell it. In total contrast, a highly respected brewer that I love local to me, Bateman's, their mild was always virtually bright when you got it in the cellar, but it always had plenty of condition, and I don't know what the particular skill was or whatever, but I was always dead happy. You are right that there are beers being, and that's why I didn't like Fast Cask from Marston's. Because Fast Cask gives you bright beer before it's ready to sell. And you do want an indicator, you know, if you are proud of your cellar, as Chris and I have been, then, you know, you get a beer and you want to get it to perfection before you put it on sale, which means that you know it's not ready when you've got it, and that hopefully you will be able to give it a little bit of time, and you wouldn't want to put one on in less than 2 days. And when I had the Marston cellar in Newark, there was one particular corner stillage where occasionally you couldn't get at that particular barrel of pedigree for 2 weeks. And I used to tell customers, we've got one of those coming. And that 2-week-old pedigree, they used to say, well, they used the wrong terminology because they said it was like wine, which of course it wasn't. It was like absolutely bloody fantastic beer that had been given a beautiful period of time to be brought to absolute perfection. So there are lots and lots of issues around that.
Do you want to, the point you raised there is one that I got very frustrated about when I was writing the cask report. The difference between a beer dropping bright and a beer having conditioned, which do quite different things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the things that I find most frustrating in pubs is like, no, it's ready to serve. Look, it's clear. It's like, no, that's not the point. It's got to be conditioned, hasn't it?
Yeah. I'd say as well, nowadays, what Ray said, time is money. Most landlords nowadays, they order on a Monday, beer comes in Tuesday, Wednesday, gets put up, vented. If it's not clear in 6 hours, gets sent back. There's no skills anymore. The beer is basically got to be ready straight away. Therefore, the beer doesn't clear in literally 12 hours. It's no good. And the skill set of landlords is gone in general. That's the issue. And time is money. And time to settle, time to condition beer is money. Landlords now and big brewers don't want to have casks sit around for 2 weeks. That's 2 weeks lost money. They want a beer in, sold and out straight
So,
away.
so this is an issue, I guess, of the decline of traditional pubs on the back of large chain pubs, I guess, and there's an education issue around cellarmanship and keeping beer. Nick, is that a role that perhaps Camera should be riding to the vanguard on?
And we are going to. That is one of the things that came out of Cameron's revitalisation project is education, information and training. We need to train our members, educate them because they don't understand it, and a lot of them out there walk in and the only thing they'll drink is cask beer on a hand pump because they think it's thing. They think anything else, key cask beers, key kegs, whatever you want to call them, is not real ale. It is. It's just in a different container, and we've got to educate our members, and we've got to help the trade. Unfortunately, as it's been highlighted, a lot of the trade do not get the training they used to have. So we've got to get out there and spend time with them, helping them, understanding what real ale is, what cask beer is, what keg is, what all of these containers, and help them, because pubcos like Enterprise and Punch are not investing in their staff. Weatherspoons are, yes, they spend a hell of a lot of time training their staff, but they're not the right training. They need to look after this beer, understand it. And I will put my hand up and say, I don't think I've actually finished a pint in a Weatherspoons for 2 years. And I think the quality of what we're seeing in Weatherspoons, particularly, has gone down in the last 2 years.
Can we just take another question on the floor before we...
Thanks anyway, yeah. But one of the other big issues, one of the reasons why you can't have beer properly so quickly, is the way that the customer has changed. The customer these days wants an ever-changing variety of beer available. Now, I've heard from a panel as to what was happening 30, 40 years before, where you were only selling one type of beer, like the pedigree beer that he had. He had a large stone pedigree beer in his cellar, and it's okay, you have one that had been there for 2 weeks. If you're running a modern operation, you don't do that. You don't have about 15 barrels all of the same beer in your cellar.
No, you do.
You're going to have 15 different barrels of beer. And therefore, it is far more difficult, I think, to actually retain beer for long periods of time. It's one, either that the manufacturers of beer have got to enable the beer to be better handled and things, or they're going to move over towards possibly different types of dispense mechanism.
Chris, your industry or your craft is being questioned here, I guess, and you know we're losing a decline of well-trained publicans. How do you respond?
Well, the first thing, just with regards to the having 50 in the same beer in your cellar, ignoring numbers, I tend to look at least having at least a week, maybe 10 days worth of stock of a particular line. So for instance, I have a house bitter which my traditional bitter drinkers drink. I have Buckham Original on. It's my regular turnover beer. I have one racked, one tapped, one venting, all the time, always. And I also have 6 stud, which is at least 10 days to 2 weeks worth of stock. Just sat there waiting, because it needs cellar time. It's got to come down to the right temperature, it's got to acclimatise to the cellar, then it's got to sit on the rack and be conditioned, it's got to work. I also have Oakham on permanently. So I have a permanent Oakham line on, and that'll either be, at the moment it's either Inferno, Citra or JHB, which is pretty much on rotation. I have spent 4 weeks building stock up in my cellar, so I know I've got at least 2 weeks worth of that line's beer sat waiting in my cellar, coming to condition. Okay, I've got an advantage, I've got space in my cellar. But presently, I counted yesterday, so I know how many, I've got 27 casks stood, waiting in my cellar, not conditioning, but coming to the right temperature and sat there waiting, aging up right, and they're going to go on. And when they go on fresh, and the flip's out and the flip's gone in 4 days. So they'll sit there for up to 72 hours, depending on which beer it is. Some beers, like we were saying before, Tim Taylor's, when we've had it on, needed longer. Some beers we can get out nice and quick, but normally be on rack for at least 2 to 3 days before we serve them, and then they're gone in 3. Gone, done. And the condition's perfect, all the way through to the last pint. To the point, if you pull that last one out and the previous one before it, it'll taste exactly the same as the one that went at the beginning of the cask, which is how it should be. Coming back to the point about cellar training, about conditions, and about the style of the training, a lot of pubs these days, especially the pubco pubs, have management, or so they have one person who's like a multi-unit operator, which seems like the pub coast seems to like a lot of things of, or Wetherspoons and things. And they have managers which they bring in, and all their job is pretty much is to manage staff. They don't have the cellar training, they don't go off and spend 3 days doing cellar courses or anything like that, and don't have the experience of learning off people who've been in and around the trade an awful long time. And I think that's where one of the things is coming in, is like we don't have that historical training of cellar technique anymore. We don't have the old-fashioned cellar guy anymore who's in there maybe 2 days a week or whatever racking out. I learnt the hard way. Back in the very early days of me taking pubs, 10, 11 years ago, I was a manager for a punch pub, employed by a guy who had the tenancy for it, and I learnt the hard way about how to keep cask. At the time, I had Tim Taylor's and Young's Bitter on, and two completely different beers. One brown dishwater, one not so good. But you learn how to make the beer right, and I went off on courses and did all these different things. But now these managers are in there, they're flipped out, and they learn how to manage the product at the bar dispense, and then they're gone again. There's no longevity of training, and I think one of the biggest things with regards to the quality, and this is something which CAMRA need to come into really, is CAMRA have beaten the drum for a long time, saying stuff like fast or Tetley's or Marston's or anything of these fast cask beers from the Molson Coors group are quality cask, but a small brewer's microbrewery keg outfit isn't real beer. But they're willing to bang the drum for something like a fast cask beer, which is non-conditioned, flipped out in 24 hours. And this is the thing, it's a case of, okay, they're changing, supposedly, but it's revitalisation when it happens. But the whole point is like, you've got to have a continuity of experience and of training and of an idea of quality. And if you want to say this is a good beer, it's a case of embrace the good and tell people like Molson Coors that the beer they're producing is shit. Sorry, watershed. It is not to the level it should be. And instead of promoting them and allowing you to be a voice for their product, which is substandard, is start saying, well, actually, no, these guys are producing beer, it's keg only, admittedly, but it is more better beer. I'm not going to say real ale, because I'm not getting into that debate, but it's more better beer than fast cask, flipped out dishwater, which CAMRA have promoted for the past 25 years.
Do you want to answer that point, or?
I think we'll call it live.
In addition, I was a CAMRA chairman for 3 years up until I resigned in July because I hated the direction the head office was going. So
we may come back to some of that point after the break. As a brewer, though, Jen, Wilf, how do you dictate, or what's your mechanism in place? You put a lot of love and care and attention into making a quality product, and then you send it out into the big wide world for who knows what to happen to it. How do you ensure that the quality at the point of dispense is as you would want it, and what are your thoughts on the decreasing nature of that in London pubs in particular?
I think we're lucky in Britain where pubs can buy direct from a brewer, for instance. And if you are making live beer in a keg, there are a lot of caretaking issues about the temperature that it's stored at, how recently it's been handled. I mean, essentially, live beer in keg does need a little bit of stillaging time. It certainly needs to be kept in a cool place. Any of us who are selling live beer in keg know that there's that kind of peak temperature spike in summertime where we get all the calls saying that kegs aren't dispensing, and you say, well, what temperature is your cellar? It behaves the same in a lot of ways. And if somebody is going to store it in a broom closet and it's not going to be kept cool and it's not going to be well rotated and they're not going to keep it fresh, they're doing the same kind of disservice to a keg beer as they would be to a cask beer. I think part of the issue in the UK has been overcoming the kind of false dichotomy of all keg beers are pasteurized and have eternal shelf lives and therefore are, you know, like a whole other animal, when actually you've got the most of the keg beers that people are enjoying on tap now are probably going to be from smaller brewers and therefore not pasteurized or not sterile filtered. So I think there's still, it doesn't take the publican's art out of the equation for it to be a keg beer. And controlling as much as you can the journey that your beer takes to the punter's hand is the magic of it. So we don't have a 3-tier system like the US. That's fantastic. We can, in a lot of ways, control how it gets to the drinker's hand. But I do think there are still issues about, I guess, the obscurity of the distribution system. You sell somebody a pallet, you don't know how long they're going to sit around for. You don't know how they're going to be sold. You don't know where they're going to end up, how old they're going to get. I think just exactly the same as cask beer ever was, any kind of live beer requires freshness, careful handling, skill. There's skill in the dispense of it, you know? And whilst I, as a drinker, am glad that I can buy, say, craft beer at the supermarket in my local neighborhood, on the other hand, I'm not sure the supermarkets know how they're meant to be treating it, you know?
Which is interesting, of course, when you bear in mind a branch of Morrison's in Yorkshire is now selling, has a bar in store, you know. It's another step in the right or wrong direction. Who knows? Well, you know, it's.
I'd say something to that.
Yeah.
I think Jen's is absolutely, as a brewer, absolutely bang on what she says. I'd lay a lot of I won't say blame, a lot of the issues at the door of the new micropubs. As in, you move in, take over an old shop, you've no cellar, your kegs all sit under the counter at ambient temperature, you go through a flash chiller, they're all fobbing and frothing. Well, of course they are. And they're not being the kegs aren't being looked after, and beer quality is suffering. I'm not saying all micropubs do this, or if they serve quickly, fair play. There's a lot of issues with micropubs serving kegs, and cask beer, obviously, ambient temperatures. And that doesn't do the beer, as we all know, does the beer no good whatsoever. And the beer that's coming out of the pumps or the taps isn't representative of what us brewers want to put out those kegs on tap. And it's, I think it's a big issue that micropubs are the big new trendy thing, and everything's all the grey. And in a way they're not, because what they're serving is I wouldn't say everybody, there's a lot of substandard beer coming out of micropubs. And it's,
who is giving them guidance? Have you as a brewer ever spoken to them and said, you know, can they come on your website or your Twitter feed and have a how-to guide or the best way? Yeah.
Go into an empty shop and put a few pallets in it and you're away.
Have you ever tried to tell a landlord how to run?
Yeah.
I think it was.
Yes, and I was banned.
I think it was my turn to say something.
Yeah.
I think we're in an extraordinary point in time at present, where in this country particularly, there is now a huge interest in home-produced beer, whether it be craft beer or traditional beer. Having been in the drinks trade for the best part of 30 years now, it always amazed me how little people cared about what they actually drank. As long as it was sort of cold, clear and wet, that was good enough. And I think we can wring our hands about who's at fault for the perceived poor quality of what might be being given to, what might be being dispensed in a pub, whether it's the brewer's fault, whether it's the publican's fault. I think we're better off looking at it and saying, going forward, let's go backwards and say that if people now are so much more interested in what they're being served, hopefully as we go forward, then that will feel people will be prepared to go to take their beer back to a bar and say that is not good enough. And I think as a nation, and you know, that's always been our terrible problem. Nobody will complain about anything, and it is that usual thing. You get served a beer in a bar, you take it back, say, look, that's, you know, that needs to go on my chips. Well, no one else has complained.
You think of looking at reaction as well.
Exactly. Indeed. And that maybe we should be slightly more optimistic and say, well, we're more likely to solve these problems because people are so much more interested. And then I see it from, you know, what I've done over the years is one of the big parts of what we try to do is is to educate the landlords that we deal with and how to look after beer. And it is coming back to what the fellow over there said, to say that just because a beer is clear doesn't mean to say it's ready for serving. It's great to listen to the idea that you're still composting beer, and how every brewer of cask beer would want to see that being done. And you can go on for a long time and say, well, there's no point in training anybody. I so frequently you go and train staff in a pub, and those staff are on minimum wage. They don't aspire to stay there, and 2 months later they're all gone, and you're back to square one, and it is quite dispiriting. But I'm quite optimistic at present. I think that the interest in beer will help to solve that problem.
Yeah, I'm optimistic as well, Will. But one of the biggest difficulties of taking something back and saying that's not right is the very fact that we now have such a broad palette of flavours and styles of beer that some brewers are saying, oh no, that's my house style, that's what it's meant to be. Now, I had an experience with a brewer who for a time was the closest brewer to where I live, and is no longer in business, and I say thank God. This guy very kindly left some bottles outside my pub with a little note, please try these with your customers. And so late one night, I thought I was doing my best friends a favour by getting these bottles out and opening them and trying them, and every single one of them went straight down the sink, because every single one of them was appalling. There are styles of beer now that are of such a range of flavours, of palates. I've drunk and enjoyed sour beers in Belgium. I'm not sort of narrow-minded on things like that, but it makes it more difficult sometimes to say that's not right. This very same brewer who had his own bar at the Nottingham Beer Festival 2 years running, the second year I went, first of all, how the hell has he come back again? And it was the day of the Seba Midlands beer competition, so once I'd done a little bit of sampling and therefore was maybe a little emboldened, I went with a couple of brewing friends and had some of his beer, and I gave it back to him and said, that's got an infection. He said, oh no, that's how it is. I said, well, how it is it's got an infection. and these professional brewers, I'm sorry, but they think it's got an infection. So it's not quite as easy to say there's something wrong with your beer now, because there is such a broader range of styles and flavours, and it's all down to the customer. It's difficult to orient the customer as to what they should be expecting.
Which is why I'm starting a game show in the beer world called Fault or Feature. You get someone a beer and they describe the characteristics. Now, is that a fault or a feature? But to go back to the point of optimism, I think at the end of all this, there's something in beer which will inspire passion in a certain number of people. So I had a pub near me that was a failing old man's pub, and it reinvented itself as a hipster craft beer bar. And they didn't do any staff training, they paid minimum wage, they all the kind of worst crimes. But the people who worked there when it opened, despite all that, got so into it. Yes, they left because they weren't given any incentive to stay, but one of them went on to become sales and marketing director of Cloudwater. Another one's now running Beer Hawk. At least 3 of them became brewers. And it was inspiring to see that they got into beer because the beer itself was special, and the pub was not supporting them. But it changed their lives. They were kind of like just drifting before then. And when I was doing the cask report, I mean, we did some kind of bar staff surveys about cask beer, and there's one Polish woman who started working in a cask beer pub because it was a job. Never heard of cask beer before. I had no idea what it was. As an immigrant Polish woman, just went, but this stuff's amazing, this is fantastic, and went on to start off her own cask beer specialist pub. So that will out, and I think it's a question of just knowing where those people are, where that passion is, where the quality is.
I must admit, I have a theory that one of the biggest problems we have is our unwillingness to pay people running bars a living wage. If you go, you know, you go to France or Italy or wherever, and you now go to France, 500, you know, half a litre of beer, €8-9. You know, and the people working in those bars, it's in effect a respected trade, and people are, you know, they make a decent living wage out of it, and they're prepared to stick with it. We don't have that in this country, and I think it does, to a degree, come down to the fact that we're all very unwilling to pay a sensible amount of money for the beer we're drinking in a bar.
So the fault is on the consumer?
I'm not saying it's a fault, I'm saying it's a cultural thing.
Yeah.
So we expect a high quality product for the lowest possible price?
Yeah, and you pay peanuts, what do you get?
Beer's become a commodity. People look at beer as a commodity product in the same way as they look at the basics. When you go shopping, you buy your basics. For a lot of people, they're prepared to pay for the basic amount, minimum amount for a basic product. But beer has moved on, and beer is now a premium product in a lot of beers. Unfortunately, certain breweries down in Cornwall still treat their main product as a commodity, and all they're interested is shipping units. They get it out the door, don't care how it's looked after, don't care what the customer thinks, as long as they keep coming back and buying the same thing. And we've got to change that culture in this country.
You could argue, that's the consumer's fault for doing it. I'd also argue it's Canberra's fault for supporting Wetherspoons, who are the biggest purveyor of cheap brown beer. Sorry.
But as a consumer, you know, we all have a role to play. I guess, you know, periodically, though we didn't get a duty hike in this budget, but periodically, you know, prices will increase, petrol prices will increase, all of these things will increase your price at the pumps. I guess your customers are never happier to pay extra 5-10 pence a pint, and particularly so the old boys in Macclesfield, I would imagine.
The pub that I have now, the Wharf, I've had for 6.5 years, and my GP that I make on my cask beer has, in fact, the GP I make on all my draft beers has been reduced over the past 6.5 years, mainly because the expectation of price that the customers have is lower than the GP that I want to get. So I opened up with all these ideas of making X percentage on per pint, which allowed me to pay my staff well, pay my bills on time, make sure everything's paid. But as the duty prices have gone up, and as hops have gone up by 2.5 times in the past 6 years, and costs of delivery have gone up, the beer that I'm getting through my door, a lot of the time the hikes have been absorbed by the brewers, but some of it is still being passed on to us. I'm having to absorb more and more and more of those prices because my customer expectation is they won't pay X amount of money for a pint. Because we can go to down the road and get a pint. I'm not going to say which pub it is down the road, but it has a big DW sign on the front. But they can go to another pub and get a pint. And there is an industry now where we have got people who are learning about the beer, and they're getting an idea about what makes a quality product and are willing to pay for that quality product. But there is still a big market of people who are price driven and just want anything that is pale, wet and moist.
I'm interested to know, though, from a brewer's perspective, like, how do you get enough of the information and the brand into the drinker's hand at a pub where
Staff.
if you have staff, so you have a can, you have a bottle, it's got a lot of brand on the outside of it. It can say a lot of chat, and you can put a lot of details on there about your hop varieties and everything. How do you put that into the drinker's hand in a pub? By its staff, I guess, is the answer, because you can't put too much heavy-handed branding into like most pubs won't have it. They won't tolerate it, and fair enough. And nobody wants to go into a place where they have like kind of brand rained down on them, or like lots of sort of indoctrination coming straight from
What we
the
have, the predominant amount of my sales is draft. The amount that I have in a fridge for bottle dispense is minimal, and it's only for occasional, really.
Specialties.
Yeah, not even specialties, just people who are something a bit more brand orientated.
Right.
So mainly it's draft. The draft, the information that's on the bump clip is pretty much the only information that the customer sees, unless they've got a bit of prior knowledge. So it all comes down to how I tell my staff.
Yeah.
Now I have a very small team. There's only 5 of us. There's me full time, and I have a couple of others who work longer shifts, and there's a couple of one shift a week jobs. when the new member of staff comes on the bar, the fresh member for that night, they're told what beers are on the bar, they're told what sort of style beer it is, they're told many particular intricacies of that particular beer. And they're educated, and they're all sharp enough because of either continued training or because of when I employ them I make sure it's the right person for the job, that a customer comes in and goes, oh, what's this one? They'll be able to say, well, it's pale and hoppy, it's going to be dry hops, it's going to be very fruity, and they'll be able to explain in layman's terms what it is. And also, they might not like cask beer or they might not like ale at all, but they all try them because they have to. So they need to be able to say, okay, I don't particularly like it, but this one's really lemony and you might like it. And it's a case of also knowing the customers. So, so for instance, we've got there's a few customers who come in who, because the beers change regularly, they'll drink a particular style of beer, and it'll be a case that they might not order it, or just whatever you think I'm going to like.
No.
That's happened with my customers. They'd come in and say, what do I want?
What do I want?
And I'd say, you want that
You
one.
want this one, exactly. And all my staff know the same thing.
A brewer can send that information to the publican, and a good publican training their staff in it. Does that incentivize the publican then to carry fewer, more consistent breweries? Maybe somebody you know what you're going to get, somebody who's going to be reliable, consistent?
For me, from a publican's point of view, I choose my brewers on, or the beers that I stock on, a certain amount of reputation that they have with me that I know I'm able to flip their beers. For instance, Pictish, I sell quite a lot of Pictish beers in the pub. I sell quite a lot of Welsh beers in the pub. And that's because the customers like beers that come from that stable. It doesn't matter which beer it could be. It could be from 3.4 up to 7 or 8%. If it's on, they've got a reputation and it flips out and it's good. I do get newer breweries, and I get beers that aren't from a brewery which I had quite a lot of before, and that's pretty much basically down to reputation that I know that particular beer's got or that particular brand's got. Every now and again I'll get a customer say, oh, I've tried this beer from this brewery, I know we've not seen it on here, but you've had to try it on. And I've sourced it, or if it's become available, I've got it in, and they've enjoyed it, and that's introduced me to another brewery which I might not know as much of. Because, okay, been in the trade a long time, but I don't know all of the 1,600 breweries we've got in the UK. And when I'm just about to get to know one, it's closed down, it's been replaced by another 3. So you go off reputation a lot of the time, and you also go off recommendation. And yeah, you do, to a part of it, you stick with the beers that you know. Yeah. Because I know that, for instance, particular breweries, obviously we've said before about different breweries have got different handling technique, and some beers need longer on rack than others. I know that I get beers in which I know how to make them work best. Because at the end of the day, I'm just like the patron in charge. I'm just the guy who serves it out. I've got to make sure that at that point of delivery, that product is how the brewer wants it to be and is in the best possible condition it can be. And that's a case of knowing how to look after that beer to make it right. And all the staff have the same thing. So it's I think it's just down. Yeah, it's training. It's training.
Shoes waving
I'm just going to ask whether the panel would like because they're all.
Shall we take our break now then? Yeah. And then.
Yeah.
Because
I'd quite like to go to
the
loo.
Go to others. We'll take a break so that so that everybody can refresh their glasses. There is also, of course, Mr. Crockwitch upstairs doing toasted sandwiches, and we'll start back again in about 25 minutes.
What's the time?
24.
20 to 4.
Okay, well, hopefully you've all had a splendid award-winning, or I think it was voted in the finalists of the Best Street Food 2017 Mr. Crockwitch sandwich. I hope they were all very nice because the queue was too long and I haven't had one yet, so I hope you're all enjoying them. That's all right. I think I've got something to keep me going for a while. You're all right. It's, some of it's hernia, some of it is beer. The second half, and we've got about just over an hour here because some of the panel have to make sure that they catch their trains to various parts of the country, and on a Sunday it's always a lottery, and we want to make sure that nobody gets lost in part of the country, so we're going to keep this one fairly focused, and I'm sure it will be a robust exchange of views. All all done in the best of spirit, of course. The second half, I think the topic of conversation that was put on the event page was the Great British Beer Festival and CAMRA. Do they still have relevance in the current beer climate? I think it was interesting. I had a quick look, and I saw in 2011 when CAMRA turned 40, Roger Protz, he wrote that complacency is not a word in the CAMRA lexicon, he said. Whereas in 2017, I think it was, Pete Brown wrote, bloody CAMRA, bloody GBBF. Nick?
Yeah.
Does CAMRA and the Great British Beer Festival and Winter Festival and all of its ilk, is it still relevant to today's climate?
Well, it depends who you're aiming the festival and CAMRA at. GBBF is one of the biggest beer festivals in the country. It caters for 3 very different types of visitor. Tuesday, which is traditionally the opening day and our trade day.
Or same old, as people
Or
say.
same old, in a very good way. But is there for us to welcome the trade in. And then for the rest of the week, it's the general public integrated with the beer aficionado. Those people who really actually understand what beer is. And they're probably about a third of the rest of the week, and that's a guess because we don't really know how many of those people are coming, but they still come in their numbers. But the bulk of the visitor to the CAMRA's GBBF and probably all of our festivals across the country are there for a good time. They're there. They go down the pub normally, and just because your local beer festival GBBF's on, that's what they come on that day. So it's very relevant to various different types of person at different times of the week. And I think what we as an organisation, CAMRA, has got to recognise and do is to try and tailor that event to those specific people at that time of the week. So on a Friday and Saturday, when it's your Londoners pouring out of work, wanting to have a good time and drink as much beer as possible, it's no different from them going down the pub with their mates. And GBBF is definitely very relevant to those sorts of people. What we've got to recognise, and we are beginning to change, and it will take a while because we've been going 45 years as we advertised, 40 years, whatever it was this year. It's going to take us a while to change, but we now need to start recognising that there is different types of beer drinker, and those beer drinkers want a different thing from a premier event like Great British Beer Festival. And we'll get there. It might take us a few years, but we're getting there. We're going to make some changes next year. Some really exciting things, and try and do a festival within a festival, offer a different range of beers. And maybe we'll change the dispense of some of our beers. We don't know. We've got to wait and see what happens. But we are getting there, and we will try and change it to cater for the 3 very distinct customers groups that we have.
So when you read words such as Pete wrote, and I'm sure you read them because you are the man responsible for festivals at CAMRA, what goes through your mind? I mean, and I'm sure people say he wrote it in a particularly provocative way to prove a point.
Yes.
But what was your response? And you say there are some changes in mind, but surely that must have been dispiriting to you.
No, because Pete had already phoned us and told us he was doing it, so we knew about it. We knew what he was, the message that Pete was trying to get across, and it was those people who come every year and complain about it every year, but still come back the following year because it's the highlight of the year for them. And there is people out there like that, and we've got to change things, and we will. But you can't turn a juggernaut round, or you can't take an oil tanker around in a matter of minutes. It's going to take a few years to get where we really want that event to be, and cater for the different types of customer.
So Pete, what were your impressions of this year's trade day?
I think depressingly for the audience, because if anyone in hoping for a good ruck, we're maybe not actually that far apart. But no, I found myself being one of those people standing there slagging GBBF off for the same things I slagged it off for the last 10 years, and being back there again, slagging it off again for the same things as I did it again. And it's like, if I don't like it, why am I still here? And I cannot imagine not going to it. That would just be weird not to go to trade day on a Tuesday. Even if I think I hate it at the time, I have to go. And that shows you the kind of institution that it is. I think the thing on this whole subject for me is, CAMRA was founded in an age where British beer, an appreciation of British beer was quite isolated. The world was in silos. This revitalisation project is called that because CAMRA originally stood for Campaign for Revitalisation of Ale. In the first year that CAMRA existed, they didn't know what real ale was. Real ale didn't exist. It was only after about a year that they went, well, we really like good beer. Well, what is good beer? And they then found out that the beer they liked was the beer that underwent this secondary conditioning in the pub. So, oh, that's interesting. Well, let's call that real ale. So CAMRA defined what real ale was. It didn't exist before then. People used to talk about draft beer before then, but that was kind of more vague. And it made sense in 1971 if you were drinking beer in Britain in 1971. I wasn't, I was 3. Actually, no, I was drinking whiskey. My mum fed me whiskey to get me to sleep. But it made sense if you were drinking beer in 1971 in Britain.
You gave him a whiskey.
That good beer happened to be what CAMRA called real ale, and most other stuff that you could get in Britain at the time was shit. We now live in a very different world where there are beer, that is the British beer tradition. There are great beer traditions everywhere around the world that are very different from ours, and we now have access to all of them, and that is fantastic that we do. And there's new ones that have come along in the last 40 years as well that could never have been imagined in 1971. It now doesn't make any sense to say that cask conditioned cask ale is the only real beer, the only quality beer, and everything else is shit. And this is a problem that CAMRA finds itself in, is that its articles of definition are set up for something that was true 40 years ago is not true anymore. And most CAMRA people I speak to acknowledge this and go, yeah, but we're the Campaign for Real Ale. And it's like, yep, okay, respect that. But it's called the Great British Beer Festival. And most brewers who produce cask ale also produce non-cask ale, which is just as good, if different. And I think there's a thing which, if I was going to go for my provocative, drastic thing again, I would say we should be considering British cask ale as a unique, specialist British product that deserves protection, that deserves guarding, that deserves all this kind of really special reverence, in the same way that Belgian lambic beers do. And no one's going to say, well, Belgian lambic beer should be sold in every single pub in the country. It's not. Belgian lambic beer should be sold in places that understand them, that respect them, that adore them, that create them. And we should do everything we can to protect British cask ale, but we should no longer pretend that it's the only good beer, or that it's the right beer for every pub and every occasion. And I think it's time for CAMRA to kind of go, and the problem CAMRA has, and I feel sorry for anybody involved in trying to sort this out because it's a mess, is for a long time CAMRA, cask ale was the same thing as good beer, and it no longer is. So the Campaign for Real Ale, which needs to exist and should exist and should always be fought for, or are you the Campaign for Appreciation of Really Good Beer, which is a totally different thing.
Well, Great British Beer or Real Ale, or does it matter? Do you, as a brewer, find CAMRA relevant?
I think what Pete said is quite thought-provoking, actually, because I've been... You consider the subject of CAMRA and think, well, essentially, CAMRA has achieved what it set out to do, which was to promote and protect cask-conditioned beer. I came to the conclusion, in my own befuddled way, that the next thing that CAMRA should be campaigning about was saving the Great British Pub, which, boy, does it need saving. But I think Pete's point there, that whole idea, what we were talking about before of dispense, what's good beer, what isn't, is what I don't think does it need campaigning for, possibly. I think it needs understanding more, possibly. And we would, when Jen was talking about the difficulty of putting live keg beer into pubs, I think the idea that a live keg beer is inferior to a cask beer because it's frequently had carbon dioxide forced into it rather than done naturally. And talking to the people from Mallinson's that are here today, they still do all of their kegs. All of their kegs are keg conditioned. So at the end of the day, what is the difference? It just has a slightly higher proportion of carbon dioxide in it. The idea that something else that occurred to me sitting here is that how simple it is to see what is a keg conditioned beer or a live kegged beer is if it's cloudy, if it's not clear. If it's clear, the chances are it isn't live. They're still live products. I think CAMRA is an interesting organisation, isn't it? It's 130,000 members, a super complainant. It still is very relevant.
190.
190? Yeah. It was 150 when I joined. I don't pay a lot of attention. But I think it does need to work out exactly what it's trying to do and stop being so reactionary and start looking forward.
It's an oil tanker, we've heard, though. It's a very difficult organisation to change midstream.
Everything can be changed.
Chris, you, I guess, let slip at the first half that you were very involved in CAMRA and then resigned. I mean, you as a publican, a consumer, I guess, do you find CAMRA relevant today?
I was 3 years ago. Well, more than that now. The local branch was on its knees. The local chairman had stepped down, and there was an EGM, and I stepped in because as a publican I saw what locally the local CAMRA branch was doing for the pubs and doing for the trade around. I came in with fresh-eyed and bushy-tailed, with all these ideas about getting new people into drinking cask and drinking beer as a whole. I set up a boutique, my little beer shop. And the wharf was growing from strength to strength. And off the strength of it, I became the guy who sourced all the beer for the local beer festival, and it was good. And the branch still now is continuing, thankfully. But I think the problem is nationally, the direction which the campaign has chased for the past while has come to a full stop, and the problem is now the market, as we're seeing it, people are aware of cask. You can't go anywhere without seeing cask. A lot of pubs sell cask, and this whole locking in of being cask ale is good ale, everything else is bad ale. It's isolating an awful lot of the growth in the market. When I had boutique, I asked all my staff, the lad who now runs it, who actually now owns who set up Five Clouds Brewery. He's not a member of CAMRA. I asked a lot of his friends. I asked the guy who runs Macclesfield Beer Company if he was a member of CAMRA. He's not either. These are guys who are mid-20s, early 30s. And I said, well, why wouldn't you join CAMRA? What is it that you don't see anything? Well, they don't have any relevance for their sort of thing. They don't promote the beers that they like to drink. They are negative against the beers that they enjoy drinking, and there's a whole stereotyping which is affected down. Okay, there's this change which we keep hearing about with the revitalisation, but it's not being actioned, and it's watering down, and it's not coming down the ranks fast enough to the point of it's now just stagnating. So for me, the CAMRA campaign, okay, yeah, it was set up for real ale, or for, as we know what Pete said about real ale came afterwards, but the revitalisation of ale and protection against the big four as it was then. Wasn't it a case of that industry then wasn't, if you wanted beer, you drank it in a pub. So it was a case of protecting the pub, because they wanted to protect the pubs that they enjoyed drinking the beer in. So in the real ale, you only could buy in pubs. You couldn't go to a supermarket or an off-licence and buy nice beer and be able to drink it at home. So where the original campaign, when it was set up, was it protecting of pubs, or was it protecting of cask ale, which we know it? So now, coming forward 40 odd years, it's a case of pubs and the trade have evolved dramatically, and real ale, admittedly, cask, as we know it, or have known it, is saved. Yes, there's quality issues which need to still be fixed, and I think that's down to education, which CAMRA need to do more of. But it also needs to sort out its own direction. So instead of just being about real ale and cask ale, it needs to be about beer. and just be protecting of beer and, because of that, protecting of pubs. Because it's the social environment, it's drinking in a social environment like this where you can drink surrounded by people you enjoy drinking beer that you enjoy to drink. Or if you're not able to, maybe, fine, whatever, go to a home. But it's protecting the pub and it's protecting the beer that goes with it. So relevant as it is, as we've known it for the past 15 years or so, yeah, that's done. Completely. But it needs to sort out its direction, and with that it's the protection of what for me is one of the biggest damaging products with the pub trade, which is the undervaluation of good beer. And that goes with the whole supporting of JD Wetherspoons.
Sue.
But that's the one thing I bring up with the camera thing is I'd like to know what camera say about their support for Wetherspoons and the voucher system and the discount in pubs for camera members. I mean, I'm only going by the fact that we opened a bar in Swansea, which was a really, really hard place to open a bar with craft beer, and it was a difficult thing. We had an opening night and we invited various people to the opening night, and it was a trade-only night, one of which was the local camera. And literally, the chairman of that local camera group walked to the bar, and the first words out of her mouth were, "Are you offering a camera discount?" Surely, if you're trying to keep those very pubs open that you say you are trying to keep open, you would actually rather pay a little bit more than the standard price to keep that pub going. We failed and we closed. Now, we have no support from our camera branch, and we didn't offer a camera discount. I don't understand how camera think they are going to keep pubs going when the first words out of their mouths are, "Do we get a camera discount?" How is that in any way ever going to work?
Julian, do you want to catch on that?
I want to add something.
Okay.
I will start by saying that I've been a camera member since December 1975. Some of you were born then, probably. And therefore, apart from my immediate family, it's the longest relationship of my life. And I am still a camera member, and I still want to be a camera member. And since I stopped running my last pub 2.5 years ago, I've actually started attending local branch meetings. My local branch, the Vale of Beaver branch, has 250 members, and branch meetings are attended by, on average, 8 of those members.
That's a high percentage.
And the issue of the Wetherspoons relationship, the issue of camera discount beyond the Wetherspoons discount, is something that was actually taken to a camera AGM by my former senior partner at Castle Rock Brewery, Chris Holmes, who was himself the chairman of camera in the mid-1970s, who believed that it was wrong for a consumers campaigning organisation to have any sort of commercial or money-based relationship with a business that was in the industry. And he was defeated in that motion. And I think it was foolish for that relationship to exist. As is my wont, I will throw in a little personal anecdote. When I was away, I think I was in Chester at a Christmas social with some friends in the industry. In other words, a piss-up. My wife rang me. She'd been left in charge of the pub. And she said, "We don't do a camera discount, do we?" And I said, "No, we don't." She said, "It's just that there's a visiting Domino's team is here, and one of them's a camera member and asked if we did a camera discount." And I said, "No, I don't think we do." And he said, "Well, you'll never get recommended in any camera publication then." And I said, if I was going to give a discount to anybody, it would be to my regular customers.
Yeah, exactly.
It wouldn't be to people who have joined. And the issue is, the question is, do you think there should be, or it is valuable for there to be, a consumers campaigning organisation in the beer world?
Yes.
Do you? Hands up if you do think a consumers organisation is a good... I'm going to follow that.
Is that not what SEVA started out as, and
No, that was a brewers' organisation, not a consumers' organisation.
Because to play devil's advocate, and I hate saying this, but if you're a consumer beer drinking lovers organisation, then you are absolutely right to campaign for getting the cheapest beer possible at the best quality. And what we want from CAMRA now is not to be just that. We want CAMRA to help the industry, to support the industry, which I believe it should do. But if you were just going to be pure about it being a consumer organisation, as a consumer, if I didn't care about anything else going on in the industry, I want the best beer possible at the cheapest possible price. And I think this is a corner it's painted itself into.
The best cheap is
No, I know that. I know that, which is why the problem with CAMRA B, the fact that it's a consumer organisation, we're putting things onto it that are not things that a consumer organisation can do.
So
we should, as an industry, I believe, we should be trying to get the price of cask ale up. But I don't think CAMRA is an organisation that can possibly do that.
I've got two from the floor. I'll take Ray first and then the lady here.
I'm not finished.
No, sorry, you still. Once Julian has finished.
Set your watches. No, I don't want to say a deal more at this stage. I will come back. I'm sure I'll have another opportunity. But having asked the question, do you think there should be a consumers' organisation? I was going to follow that by saying, do you think it should be called the Campaign for Real Ale? Which is another question entirely. And the third thing was, do you think it should be an active campaigning organisation, or do you think it should be a discount club? Because as things stand, when I was in Lincoln branch of CAMRA in the late 70s as the secretary, virtually every member attended the branch meetings because they joined CAMRA for a reason. They joined to campaign for what they perceived as good beer. And now, the only benefit, CAMRA has 190,000 members, because I did check on the website before I came out. Having 190,000 members gives it significant political clout. And they get listened to because they can quote a membership. There's only the Labour Party of political parties that's got more members. The Conservative Party doesn't even have 190,000 members. But the Campaign for Real Ale does. But a lot of those people are members because they get encouraged, because they will get the Wetherspoons vouchers. And incidentally, I've never spent one of those in my life, even though I'm a member of CAMRA. And when I get asked in a pub if I'm a CAMRA member, I say yes I am, but I don't want a discount, thank you, because I didn't join CAMRA to get cheap beer. The Nottingham Drinker, which is one of the best CAMRA local publications, has a whole page dedicated to updating you on where you can get discount through being a CAMRA member. And I think those things are fundamentally wrong about the way the organisation is structured. But there are, of course, bigger issues that need to be addressed during the course of this afternoon about how it's going forward with its revitalisation project and so on. I'll shut up for a bit.
I'll just Nick come back on that, then I'll take Ray and just over here then.
And what I will say, don't tar every CAMRA member with the brush of wanting a discount. I am a member of Burton South Derbyshire branch. We are proud of the fact that we have not a single branch pub that gives a discount. We don't ask for it, we don't want it. We have two Wetherspoons, they do what they like. But we are the Campaign for Real Ale in Burton, and we want to support the pubs and we want to support them. I don't take discounts. I was forced to take one last night by the licensee of the Brunswick in Birmingham in Derby, who when I was asked, are you a CAMRA member? I was about to say no, and he said, yes he is, and he can't get away with it. And I ended up paying slightly less on a pint, which I was happy to pay the full price on. Yeah. In my opinion, my personal opinion, if I get a discount, somebody in the room is paying for it, and I don't agree with that.
I'll just take one floor. Ray first.
2 points from me, myself. I think CAMRA, obviously, the biggest consumer organisation in Europe now, and from a brewer's point of view, when you run your regional competitions and that, and you win an award and you go to GBF, it's a big day out for us.
Yeah.
We all get in the cars from the valleys up to London, and it's a big spectacle. It's massive, and this year was a great year for us because we had a goal in London, and I appreciate all the work and the volunteers, that obviously do all these festivals. Now, without these awards, we don't get a trade. Like, and our trade has picked up a lot because we've won awards. And I take my hat off to all the members for that. The other point is the cask and keg thing. I had, I think it was the Gwent camera who come to our brewery, and we had a debate that said cask be keg, you know. And I think one of the camera guys came up with a really good point. He said, what is the keg beer you're selling? Is it pasteurised? Is it sterile filtered? Is it not filtered? So I think what we've got to try and organise between us all is how do we define this new keg craft beer that's coming in, right? There's all so many different ways of doing it. And I think Canberra, you know, real ale is real ale. This keg beer, or whatever you want to call it, has to be something. And it has to, you have to be able to tick the boxes in it. Is it filtered? Is it pasteurised? No, because the old keg beers years ago, you remember the old rights we used to have up the valleys, like? It was dreadful, like.
Still in the plough at Aberhaman, innit?
Some camera members think...
I took out the plough at Aberhaman.
So I think it's important that we define this thing, and whatever it is, it has to be done properly, right? Because there's so many Mickey Mouse keg beers about as well, you know.
The name exists, surely, doesn't it? And part of the other thing it does, Great British Beer. It doesn't. Wouldn't that suit the purpose? I'll take a point from here.
So, I've been a member of Cameron for 30 years, and I think if you're not a member of Cameron, perhaps you don't have a right to have a go at Cameron. So I've always been a member. What should we do now? It should be educating. It should be educating.
Agree.
And about the price of beer.
Yeah.
The quality of beer, and like you said here, about keg beer, what is it? What sort of thing is it? But also, just how much it costs to make beer. We have, we're from Madison's Brewery here. We've got Cameron groups coming to our brewery, and we talk to them about things, and we're saying, 1 week out of 4 goes to beer duty. And they go, what? And we say, and then we pay VAT. They go, what? On top of it? Yeah. And then we've got corporate. I'm not moaning about it, but I think general public, Cameron members, they know how beer is made. Yeah, it's great. They appreciate it. I'm not making a fuss over it, but there's so many people like Cloudwater who have said, we're not doing cask beer anymore because we just, number one, can't guarantee the quality. And number two, we're not making a profit on it.
I would say my point would be, to follow on Sarah's point, a lot of it's not necessarily a camera thing, it's a cultural thing. Cask beer is seen as a commodity, has been already been said. Therefore, a 4% cask beer is a certain price. I could brew a cask beer with 20 kilos of citra in it, what costs 500 quid. Some other guy brew it with about 100 grams of fuggles in it, costs like 30p. But it's still 4% cask beer. Why should I pay more for your beer?
Yeah.
Because my beer costs 400 quid more to make. Yeah. Well, I don't care about that. It's cask beer. Cask beer suffers from an image and a real price squeeze. Yeah. And Camera, we've been involved with Wetherspoons, who, if you knew what they paid for cask beer, it was absolutely criminal. It's basically cost price. They want to pay brewers cost price for the beer. It's just ridiculous. I mean, we don't sell those things, never have done. We'll never sell to them.
I think that's wrong. Camera should be do the same about it. We had a wrong invoice to us from a local brewery, and it's meant to go to Wetherspoons. On the same delivery, they were charging us £78, and they gave us the wrong invoice. They gave us Wetherspoons invoice, and they charged us 47 quid. So next time he said Johnson beer, I said, yeah, I'll have it 47 quid. He said, I can't afford to do that. I said, you can do Wetherspoons. You can't do it to me, don't supply.
There was a point, a gentleman just behind you, actually, on the yep.
Yeah, I'm going to try and tie several elements together here. I've been a Cameron member since 1977. I'm closely associated with the brewing industry. I have 5 pubs in Good Beer Guide, 6 ones in currently. I also sit on the Cameron National Festival Committee. I also sit on the National Volunteers Committee, which seeks to educate Cameron members. So I've been with a position of authority, and what I bring to that party is exactly what you've been saying about the guys people go to my pub now and will legally drink the craft and the real ales. It's down to educating the membership, to be able to educate the trade, then in turn to educate their staff, to be enthusiastic about this product and not to undervalue it. So this is all part of the revitalisation we keep talking about. Several points I'm probably missing it, but what I'm saying to you guys is that camera is still very, very relevant. And GBBF, the original question, is extremely relevant because that in itself is changing to reflect the modern trade, which opens the opportunity for newcomers to come and see what's on offer, for you guys then to be able to value correctly the offering to the public and charge a proper price. And by the way, I don't understand the camera discount either.
Gentleman there.
You don't need GBBF now because there's so many clubs now, I think anyway, that you don't need one big beer festival to supposedly show you all of these different beers and things. There's so many pubs now that you can go in on a weekly basis that are having a something festival or another festival, blah blah blah, we've seen it. I don't think it's needed in one big place anymore. And actually the last time I went to GBBF, and I haven't been since, that was 2 or 3 years ago, last time we went there, we literally, how long were we there? 4 or 5 hours, and we must have walked around that whole festival and didn't find a single beer that we wanted to drink.
It's an old-fashioned brown twig water.
And that's
And gentleman at the back.
No, I'm a student and I love finding a cheap drink. And my friends are over here drinking Budweiser, and I'm over here with my double moose salt. And it costs more, and they don't understand why I decide to buy expensive beer. But I'm like, try it, and you'll get it. The variety out there is beyond what you can believe.
Yeah.
And I've recently found some like minds in the Cardiff University Real Ale and Cider Society.
Yeah, they're a big group actually.
Yeah, I've had the most brilliant conversations with them, and it's something I'm truly proud to be a part of. So.
But it's a
But
struggle, isn't it, to get people to pay that bit more.
As consumers, we're fed in other markets. You look at the explosion in craft gin, and people are willing to subscribe to gin clubs and pay £40 a month for a good bottle of gin. Why are we not having that same explosion in real beer, or good beer?
I wrote a piece about this recently, and I always like to make the comparison with wine. Whereas if you're in a decent pub and you've got a good wine list in a pub, you'll have a white wine, which is a house wine that's, I don't know, 12, 13 quid a bottle. And then depending on how good the wine list is, you might go up to something which is like 70, 80 quid a bottle, something like that. And no one who was drinking wine sits there and goes, hang on a minute, the 12 quid one and the 70 quid one are both white wines from France at 13% ABV. Why is that one 70 quid and that one 12 quid? Yeah. They just assume that the 70 quid one must be way, way better than the 12 quid one. And we need to get more of that knowledge into beer.
Well, it's super. You just
Is that a role for camera?
Yes. Yeah, it is. It's a role for us to educate. It's education. That's what we've said. And I know people are kind of dissatisfied we're not there yet. We are. We're about to announce this and what we're actually going to do. Give us a few weeks and give us until April when we go to our conference in...
It all comes down to the AGM.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be launched at last year's AGM, but they delayed it.
Yeah.
And I went to the first revitalisation meeting in Manchester, in the north area, that first revitalisation meeting. The questions were all lead. So the questions were built in a way which directed the answers to how they wanted the answers to be got. Instead of it being, and what we all walked out of there, and I'm sure, well, Rob Nicholson, I know you've had contact with in the past, was there with me that time. And we
I was in that meeting actually.
Yeah, we all came out of that of being a case of all they've done is try to direct our questions to an answer they want us to hear. I know it might have changed later.
Well, no, the workshops were deliberately I did to get people out, but that was only one way of getting information. We carried out 3 separate surveys where they were completely free to put more information, and those surveys were the ones that we're basing our recommendations on. We've reviewed those. We had to do impact assessments because we've got to understand if we did something what that impact would be on camera. At the end of the day, we've got to think. You're right. We are a massive consumer organisation. We've got 190,000 members. We've got a voice. People listen to us in the industry, and we need to continue to maintain that, but move along. It should be evolution, not a revolution.
So, with regards to impact assessments.
Yeah, they're done.
Yeah. Does that impact assessment include removing of the discount structure with the camera and how that would affect the membership? But surely sat on the national executive, you are able. You say you don't accept that. You don't.
No.
None of the pubs in your area accept discounts, and you're quite proud of the fact that you never asked for one.
Yeah.
You sat on the NE, and surely this has been raised within the. I know it's been raised in revitalisation because I know I mentioned it myself in the meeting. That surely sat on the NE and you don't agree with discount structures and all that sort of stuff. Isn't it in your position to say, let's scrap that, or what's the impact assessment said about that situation?
Yeah.
What's that going to do to the membership?
Sitting there saying, oh yes, I think this, but you are the director in camera. There's people with important positions in camera.
It is something. It is something we are reviewing, very much so, in view of the fact that if we are really going to be looking to save the pub, the Great British Pub. And one way of saving the Great British Pub is making sure that they take 100% of the profits from a pub rather than giving it to the customer. Then we are looking at it, and Tony Lewis here is my chief support officer, can vouch for that we are actually reviewing the whole discount proposition for this year.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. Okay, I think there's a lot of membership organisations all over the UK, and one thing that's quite common with them is consumers expect some kind of discount. In the organisation you belong to, you do expect some kind of discount. It's something which has come through time, and you can blame Tesco, you can blame the Cup Card for this, but that is where we are today. There is a high proportion of the membership who do expect that. Now, what we also have to acknowledge is, and I apologise, I didn't catch your name, but what we also have to acknowledge is that the 190,000 people do support the campaign in other ways. So we had 25,000 people email their MPs this year, for a campaigning benefit. Arguably, you may not get that level of engagement if we had a lower membership. So there are other benefits to having a higher membership, if you see what I mean.
Sorry, are you saying therefore that 165,000 members didn't bother to email their MP? But they belong to a campaigning organisation, but they couldn't be mobilised or asked to actually do something that of a
All about
campaigning
active
nature.
membership. All about active membership. Active members are going to be there whether there's a discount or not.
Can I just take the point for the...
And obviously, we don't have to.
I'll come to you then.
Can you correlate the 25,000 who emailed to achieve this, achieve that? And obviously, a lot of members will do that. But there's also a lot of members who literally signed up at a beer festival because they were pissed. Somebody said, oh, if you sign up, you pay 20 quid, you get 20 quid of Wetherspoons vouchers.
Yeah.
So, and you correlate.
I completely accept. You have, let's call them armchair supporters. Yeah, of course.
Gentleman here.
Anyway, how many members did it have before it introduced the discounts? And how many, it's now got 190,000. So presumably, it must have, the discounts must have helped, I suppose, in growing membership.
Yes, oh, without
Well,
doubt.
the Wetherspoons vouchers have helped in growing the membership.
Yes, so therefore they're a good thing for two reasons. First of all, they're good for your members. Secondly, they're also good for the British pub industry, because you're actually getting people going into pubs. Now, I know from my own knowledge that Wetherspoons are probably the largest retailers of cask beer in the United Kingdom as a group of companies. And therefore, as I see it, the discounts are actually beneficial. They're not negative in any way, they're actually helping.
I'll come back on that.
Yeah, Julian, I know you wanted to make a point.
Yeah. Only if you finish, sir. I would question whether or not it's beneficial simply to grow membership by giving a discount when that membership actually isn't. They're not members for any reason other than you gave them a discount. And then there is also the issue of it being, in particular, Wetherspoons you get into bed with. Now I'm not a hater of Wetherspoons. I've used Wetherspoons pubs. The nearest small town, large village to where I live is a place called Bingham in Nottinghamshire. It has got a Wetherspoons. It's far too small a place, in my opinion, to have a Wetherspoons. But the last time I did a little tour Bingham, the best beer I had that evening was in the Wetherspoons. And I include the Castle Rock pub down the corner and another craft beer and cask beer pub as well. But at the same time, to say that you want to champion Wetherspoons when that kind of pub is the kind of pub that has caused the closure of so many small pubs because of the competition, the level of unfair competition that the small pubs have been faced with on price and issues like that. Yeah, you can love Wetherspoons as much as you want, and they have done a service in delivering cask beer, but they haven't enriched what you would call our traditional pub industry, because they ain't traditional pubs. And quite often when you go in and you get faced with the staff and you order a pint and you say, how much will that be? And the barmaid or barman says, I don't know until I press the button on the till. Yeah. That's not the kind of service I want when I go into a pub.
This is why I think it's kind of what I was saying earlier. There's an interesting dichotomy of what Cameron's trying to do, because if you're going to be a consumer, we're unique in this country in a consumer organisation having so much influence over the industry and being recognised as the big industry body. Look at America. We always compare America. Look at the Brewers Association in America. It's an industry body that, and this is not criticism either, it could have sounded like one. It's out for its members' interests, and that's all. The American Craft Brewers Association is there to protect the members of the American Craft Brewers Association. It's a lobbying group for members of that organisation. CAMRA, as a consumer organisation, is there for its members' interests, so are beer consumers. Now, you look at something like Groupon, which exists to get discounts for its members. No one could say that Groupon is bad or shouldn't exist, but it's there to get discounts for its members. And CAMRA, you could argue, a lot of CAMRA members are there because it's a kind of a beer Groupon. That's not compatible, perhaps, with being a campaigning organisation that's there to save the industry, and that's where it splits. We've put so much. CAMRA's had such success. We've put so many different things on where it should be doing, and it can't necessarily be we're going to get the best deal for our members versus we're going to campaign to save the industry that we care about. They're not necessarily compatible.
Is that maybe down to CAMRA looking at the fact that they want to drive their membership numbers up to increase their ideas of lobbying power against trying to save the thing? So they're trying to be both. It's not the case that we force them to be both. They're trying to increase their lobbying power by increasing their membership turnover or membership numbers, which obviously looks good on paper, but actually means nothing because it's about active membership more than anything. But they're also trying to do it, and the only way to attract it is by. So they're trying to be both,
It'd be
but they can't.
I
think a good project would be for 12 months. Would CAMRA to be completely removed discounts on Wetherspoons vouchers just for 12 months. New members don't get any discounts, don't get any offers, don't get anything else. You're a member to save pubs. Your £25 a year is going to be used purely for campaigning purposes. You're not going to get any discounts for it. This is what you're going to get, and then see what happens to membership numbers. And then you'll get an idea on your number of active members, because obviously we found out you've got 25,000 active members who write to MPs, but you haven't got 165,000 members who are going to sit there and do something. So it's a case of what do you want?
That 25,000 figure is normal for that kind of thing. We've just done a ballot at SEBA, 800 members, 110. That is a normal figure. There's actually a lot of people who look at 25,000 say that was a good figure. You've got to live in the real world here.
We had a branch of 40, just shy of 600 members in East Cheshire, where I was chairman for 3 years. Active membership in that branch, we maybe had 35 to 40 who do pub scoring, and come to branch meetings, I'd be lucky to see 8 or 10 people. So that's an active membership.
I'll take a point here.
10%.
I'll take a point here, then I'll take Sue, and then I bring Jen in because she hasn't had a say on this one.
Just to turn on his head a bit, if CAMRA, I mean, don't be wrong, I got a lot of time with CAMRA, especially our local CAMRA guys, extremely responsive to us, and a lot for us as we've been here. However, on a national basis, if CAMRA as a body was saying we're here as a campaign to keep these pubs open, every time they come to the bar, I would say, please take 10% extra off my card as a CAMRA member, and I'd rather pay more for the beer. How many members will they have in a year's time by doing that, rather than getting 10% off? I'd be quite interested to find out.
Sue?
Well, I was just, Yeah, I was just going to say that I was at a Marston's event recently, and I was having a discussion about camera, and the guy I was talking to said, what you've got to remember is that I was talking about SEBA and camera and the differences between the two, and he said, what you've got to remember is SEBA is an industry body, and camera is there for the consumer. Okay, and I said, yeah, I absolutely agree with that, and if that was how it was, that's fine. But unfortunately, as brewers, they try and tell us that they are an industry body. They tell us how we should serve our beer, what we should tell everyone about our beer, how they won't take it, how they will take it. And I think it's fine if camera are seen as a consumer body and they're just there for the consumer. But they're not, but they really are not. We're very, very tied, we find, in a lot of situations, as to the beer that we can supply. Because
So
and Cameron will bring you up on the day of the beer festival and say, oh, I'm just about to put your beer on, but I can't put it on because I haven't got this, I need this information. It's absolutely ridiculous, but that's not a consumer body. That's encroaching into the brewer's side of things.
So you're saying a consumer body shouldn't have a role, for example, in telling Marbles that their beers are maybe weren't blacklisted from the last beer festival? You know, is that a consumer facing issue? Jen, come to you on that.
Anyway,
Bring Jen on.
To totally derail this conversation from our current frame of reference, if we were talking about cheese, in a post-Brexit universe, all the UK styles of cheeses are going to have to invent a new certification, achieve the certification, advertise the new certification for the consumer benefit of understanding that they are an appellation or a terroir of cheese, that they are made to a style. I think there's something in it for the producer and for the consumer about a style being sacred with very clear boundaries and that the person knows what they're buying. It doesn't necessarily mean that the format, the brewer, the raw materials are sacred, but there are clear lines about a product. So for my money, I think there's something here about consumers and producers getting together to say this is a protected style. It may have to be dispensed in a certain format. It may have to be brewed in a certain way. There are things that you're allowed to expect. And I think there's something there then that's bigger than the UK. I think there's something there then that is for the worldwide consumer to be able to say this is a protected, accredited style that I wish to consume, only produced in traditional fashion, only with traditional ingredients and traditional methods. And therefore, by purchasing this product, I have put my money in protecting this specific style. Now, maybe that's more complicated than just being real ales, but to me, the British tradition of brewing gets a little bit lost in trying to do modern styles in cask or traditional styles in keg. Like, I think this is about an outcome in a glass that is start to finish in keeping with a definition of a style and a tradition. And these times of things being a bit muddled and everything's like a new take on a style and everything has to have gooseberries in it to be a thing, and like just, you know, let's just talk about a specific start to finish product and process being protected. And for my money as a consumer, I'd like to be able to know that if I saw something was accredited, you know, if it's going to call itself a cheddar cheese, then it has to come from the cheddar gorge, or, you know, like for things to be protected, to my mind, I'd like it if it was certified and not necessarily up for interpretation.
Yeah. So Nick, I guess the question would be then, has camera become something that it was never intended to be? And given that we're in the home of Welsh rugby, is it akin to perhaps a lot of things that are wrong with Welsh rugby, in that it's run by a lot of old men in blazers who can't move fast enough with the ever-demanding change of the millennial consumer?
Well, I'd take offence because I'm not an old man in a blazer.
Here we go, you've answered your
But I think cameras probably is still very relevant. We need to be there. and I'll ask the question. I'll throw it back to Sue because you've asked me. How much was your tax bill last month?
Let's say that now.
How much was it bigger than your profit from the beer?
Well, can I just say I shut my brewery?
Well, with the one you're working with, your partner and friend next to you there, the tax bill, the tax that we are charged, you are charged to produce.
But how is that helping by
But that's-
giving people discounts
Well-
on the pints they're buying in the very pubs that the
Yeah.
breweries are trying to open and sell beer through?
What-
How is that helping
Especially
that
when-
problem?
But what we need to do, as together, is address the tax problem. Well, no, we do.
No,
We are paying more tax.
It's good, but that's...
We are paying more tax. Okay, we have a voice. We can influence government. We were in there last week. We got some changes in the last budget. We didn't get enough. I don't think there was enough done in that budget. There should have been more help for you as the industry and things. We're not going to get anywhere without 190,000 members, 200,000 members. As soon as we hit that 200,000 members, we will be a real voice. We're a real voice now. And what we need to do is work together to try and change the whole tax regime in this country.
It's a perception that people have.
Yeah, we need to change it. Get that tax down. You're paying more tax in this country on that beer. How much of that pint goes to tax? And then when it's
all that's after this Brexit shambles happens.
Yeah.
Countries are screwed. Do you think beer drinkers are going to come anywhere near to domestic tax breaks?
Nick, I think your argument is that
Okay,
we were talking before about what people are prepared to pay for beer. You only need to go abroad to more developed parts of Europe, for want of a better phrase, to see that generally speaking, you go to a pub there, you pay a lot more for beer than you do in this country. All of those countries, almost all of them have no tax on beer. So why does CAMRA seem to think that this is an incredibly important thing?
I think we need to address it. I go abroad, and my experience of the vast majority of Europe is that I'm not paying more for beer than here, except in your capital cities. But okay, I accept Belgium is a quality product, and I'm prepared to pay for it, and most people do.
Go to rural France, go to rural Italy.
Why is it?
Yeah.
So why would you not pay it here?
Well, I do.
Why is it different?
Yeah, personally, I do.
Pay it here.
Personally, I do. But other people don't, and they see it, and maybe we've given them the wrong steer.
Here's a 1-2 euros a bottle, and in any shop, beer is more expensive, and they're all rubbish Belgian beers. But over here, our beers have more hops in, they have more expensive hops in, it's a more expensive product.
Yeah, I accept that, and I know that, but you're also paying a lot more tax on that, and therefore that's taking a big chunk of it.
So why as a national executive do you want to give us even more discount?
Pardon?
Why as a national executive do you want to try and get even more discount
I
out of the
don't want
amount of tax
discount.
that we're giving out?
No, I don't want the tax discount.
Julian, do you want to come
I
in?
want you to get the tax. I want the basically, if it's £3 a pint and you're only getting £1 out of it because of the tax, I want you to get £2 out of it, and I'll carry on paying my £3 or whatever, £5. But I don't think. I think the big issue here is that so much of your effort goes into keeping the government afloat that we need to address that as well as making sure that we don't.
But wouldn't it be better initially, seeing as you are a director of CAMRA and other, the other CAMRA, initially before you do that, would it not be better just to stop the discount of all of those beers? That would be an immediate effect on brewers, a massive immediate effect on brewers. Would that not be an initial step to make before you do the very...
Well, I have said we are reviewing those. I said 10 minutes ago we were reviewing our discount package.
Julian, do you want to come in on that, and then I'll come back to someone there. All right.
Well, I'm not entirely sure that I want to come in on this because I'm going to piss some people off. But then again, hey. I'm assuming that all of you people buy things other than beer in your lives, even though it may be a high percentage of your spend. Think of something else that you buy and think about a meeting taking place among the producers of what you buy, where they are conspiring to raise the price that you pay for what you buy. And tell me if you think that would be a good thing. Because what I'm seeing here is an attempt to say we've got to change the market, we've got to change what people pay, we've got to persuade people to pay more when I can go to the supermarket and buy beer for 89 pence a bottle. We've got to make them pay £5, £6, £7, £8 in the pub because that's what we need. How on earth are you going to devise this market development to make that happen? Because that's what you're trying... I haven't finished yet. Because that... Ex-school teacher, did you notice? Because that's what you appear to be trying to do. And go back, you buy other things. And you don't want those other things you buy to become more expensive. And what we've got here is we're going back to the whole culture of what beer drinking is about and the demographic. And you're not, believe it or not, you don't represent the demographic of beer drinkers in this country. And you wouldn't pretend to. And what you've got now is going back to a very old quote that my even more belligerent brother than I am once said. He said, beer drinking is being turned from being a working class way of life into a middle class hobby. And what you've got now is, it's not, I would rephrase that slightly, beer drinking, which does include commodity as well as craft, and I first heard the terms commodity and craft by a Molson Coors speaker at the SEBA conference several years ago, who talked about certain beers being commodity beers, whereas cask has always bestrode both of those concepts to some degree, because, as I said earlier, when I go out to the pub, I don't go out to pontificate about beer, I go out to drink it whilst I'm having conversations with my mates. And I'm not talking about I want to buy the most expensive beer there, like I don't go out to buy the most expensive wine unless it's a special occasion. The everyday supping, as opposed to sipping, of beer has to be price conscious. Because we're talking about people who don't have oceans of money. They're already deserting the pub and buying from the supermarket because they can't afford to pay the pub prices that exist now. So for you to be saying, we need to raise the price of beer, well, congratulations and good luck with that.
We're not saying you need to raise the price of beer, we're only saying, can they stop giving them it very cheap compared to what everyone else is paying, which is different. That's a different thing.
I would also say, it's okay you saying there's a commodity market. There's plenty of brewers who will supply quality beer, Molson Coors, all these people in Sea brew shouldn't actually in Sea, not small brewers. Well, that's a different point.
Oh, good.
That's beer debate. That's beer debate 3.
What I'm saying is, a lot of brewers, there's so many brewers nowadays, and the price of cask beer is being driven down and down and down. It's getting to the point now where brewers can't make any money out of draft beer. That's where you're getting the likes of Cloudwater, Magic Rock, and Northern Monk saying, well, you know what? Some craft beer, I'm not going to make it anymore, make keg beer, bottle beer, can beer. Craft beer, cask beer, will soon become brown, boring, cheap beer for the masses, again, as it was.
Well, not the sort I like. Oh, no!
Because people won't pay for it. People who want to pay for beer will pay for the keg and the can. They won't pay for cask. So cask is going to be, well, I don't make cask anymore. So the cask beer will be the cheap stuff that goes in Wetherspoons, 48 quid a cask. That's my opinion. As a brewer, is my opinion what's going to happen. If CAMRA and others don't address it.
Going to shout at me now.
I want to take your point and talk to I want to take your point and talk to Gent's analogy a little bit. I went to Cheddar Gorge this summer to look at cheese being made there. To have some cheese. It's nice. And there is an actual Cheddar Gorge cheese company there now, which is quite recent. And cheddar obviously used to be matured in the caves. They've now kind of got this cellar in the Cheddar Gorge Cheese Company where they have replicated exactly the humidity, the temperature, everything else that you get in the caves. And they mature some cheese in the caves, and they mature some cheese in this facility which is exactly the same conditions. And when you take the two cheeses out, they taste completely different. But it's like, what is it that's in the caves that makes it special? We don't know. but it tastes different. Now imagine I've got those two cheeses, which are both excellent, and I can't sell those cheeses for the same price as a packet of Kraft cheese singles, which are more expensive.
Or Canadian cheddar, maybe.
Or Canadian cheddar, which would be a better example. And it's like, no, I just want to sell. I'm not against people buying cheap, shitty cheese. I just want my cave matured cheddar to sell for a higher price than that.
You have
And there's room
every
for both in
right
the
to
market.
charge whatever you want for your beer. But then you'll bemoan the fact that nobody's prepared to pay it.
But why is no one prepared to pay it?
When it's people say you don't pay that much for it, have money off.
Do you do what people tell you?
That's the sort of thing. Can say beers were not worth that? That's the problem.
I've been in Cameron for 20 years. Yes, I know that's quite young in this.
Only compared with me.
Yeah, exactly. So, I've only been in for 20 years, but when I joined, it was like, real ale is a premium product, should be a premium price. And now here we are, 20 years later, and it's still like, but here's 50p off your pint in McSpoons. And it's all about...
You know I don't approve of the discount. I've already made that clear. What I've been querying is a desire to try and up the price of a product.
See that, but I don't think we are.
I guess.
Right.
Closest to the bar, you see.
I'm, albeit a very, very part-time brewer of beer, I am still tied into the whole concept that for a given ABV, I can only charge a certain price. I can't charge any more than that. It doesn't matter what I say I've put into that beer, people only want to pay a certain price for that strength. Now, if I put that same beer into a keg, I can say, this is what I've done. It's got this, it's got this, it's got this. And I'll charge whatever the fuck I like, and people will pay it. Because
certain people will pay it.
Because you've got that, they appreciate it, isn't it? But as soon as it's in a cask, it's like, but it's a 5% beer, that means it can't cost more than 70 quid a night, because I can't put it on the bar for more than 3 quid.
It's perceived as a beer of the people if it's in cask, you see. It's perceived as a beer of the wider population rather than something elitist.
I've got breweries down the road who can brew beer that they can sell for 60 quid a night, because there's all in it, and that they can put on the bar for 3 quid. I put more in, it costs me more to make it. So literally, to sell it for the same price as the brewery down the road is coming out of my own pocket.
Yeah.
I'll take a point here and then gentleman here as well.
As gentleman there was just saying in his...
Oh yeah, sorry, I'll just stop putting hops.
Hang on, big up.
No, in his beer activities.
It's all in it.
No,
Come in, just take a point here, thank
no,
you.
It's all about packaging and marketing, isn't it? That basically, as the gentleman said, if he puts his beer in a keg, he can get more money for it. If he puts it in tins, he'll probably get even more money because he's got a much wider and diverse market. So he's moving away from a situation where he's only being able to flog his beer in a very limited area, which is in public houses where they've got the equipment to dispense cask conditioned beer. So really the industry seems to be adapting pretty well to change conditions. And my view is that the campaigning organisations ought to support and recognise that form of adaptation. No, the idea of beer being for the working man is the working man has changed, hasn't it?
Indeed it has.
40 years ago, most of us would have been involved in shoveling coal out of mines or in steelworks and things. We're not now. We work with our brains more than our hands. So life has changed.
One of the most recent developments for us as publicans, which going forward will be very relevant, is what's happening in Scotland and what's trying to happen to the 70 in Wales. Is a
Minimum alcohol
price
pricing.
being set. Now, as a publican, I think it's an extremely good idea. It will decrease the amount of people's consumers at home. Where does Camera stand on this idea, and is the price which is currently being set at 50 pence a unit far too low in my opinion? And it should be set what the relevant price of an average pint in a pub should be, but perhaps £1 a unit. I know it's expensive, it does drive the consumer back to the pub, and avoids the bin drinking, which they all say they're trying to avoid. And it's probably back to the bin drinking and the the control of the pubs back in the hands of licensees as it was always meant to be, and not the likes of Mr. Tesco and Sainsbury's and people like that. Where does CAMRA stand on trying to push this forward? And I can't do nothing from CAMRA as far as this is concerned, only from the government. So.
Nick, minimum alcohol pricing, is that part of CAMRA's revitalisation project?
No, because with the fear is if you have minimum alcohol pricing, what happens in 10 years' time? What happens when the anti-alcohol lobby turns around and says, like they did with smoking, we can't have you drinking, so we're going to price it so that you can't have a pint. What happens if the minimum unit price is £5?
People that buy good stuff instead of cheap
Yeah,
stuff, they get the same price.
I haven't seen any homeless people with no money not smoking and stuff. They still smoke even if
Yeah.
they got no money.
So
they still drink if they got no money. They can still afford it somehow, can't
Well, they can drink at the moment because they can get white lightning or whatever ilk of that for less than 10 pence a bloody unit. But if you accept minimum unit pricing, it's the start of a slippery road which will see us pricing alcohol like we did prohibition. We're going to have prohibition if you do it.
Doesn't that not make CAMRA though?
So you believe
proactive towards Tesco's and people like that who keeps underselling alcohol, which makes a man in the street think, shall I have a pint at home and I'll take a 24 pack at home for a tenner, or shall I go down to the pub with my mates and have 3 or 4 pints in a good environment where the beer is enjoyable, it's appreciated, and you're paying the proper price for it. Yeah. The minimum price of alcohol drives people back to where the pubs originally
At the moment.
which was in a controlled environment in a public house.
I totally agree. I think the best place, I would stop off-licence selling alcohol. I'd stop Tesco selling alcohol tomorrow because I don't think it helps us at the pub industry.
Unless you introduce a minimum price of alcohol, there's the only thing Tesco's, Sainsbury's, people like that involved in, is their profit margin. And if their profit becomes a point where they can't make a profit on it anymore, they're not going to start racking up their shelves with cheap prices of alcohol.
Do you think they actually make a profit on a slab of Carling now?
They will not undersell alcohol if they can't get away with it.
Do you think they make a profit on a slab of Carling now?
No,
They don't.
not at all. I know for a fact that they undersell alcohol.
Yeah.
I know in fact from my business background, right? That they undersell products and alcohol deliberately to drag a consumer into there to buy something else.
Yeah.
And they are willing to offset that all day long. Because they know if somebody coming in for a cheap price of alcohol will bring them in, they might buy a bag of sugar, a bit of coffee, but something else. And they know that's the best way of getting that consumer into their business. If they can't do it anymore, then what happens to their pricing?
There's better ways of forcing public.
No, it's not.
There is better ways to get the customers back in. VAT. Let's abolish VAT on alcohol served in
How does that stop
pubs.
somebody going to Tesco's?
It make it far more expensive.
Buster, at the bar. Got a point at the bar. I'll just...
There's a number of options there. As a brewer, I would be appalled to have government setting the price at which I can sell my products.
Yeah.
That's lunacy. That's the first step to hanging up my brewer's gloves. Yeah, why would I want to be in an industry where the government is setting the price? Now, somebody asked the question, what are the other options? VAT, okay, might be. I'm not convinced. VAT's not a great tool. There are a whole bunch of things. There was a proposal many years ago on a corporate social responsibility tax. The tax paid by retailers on the containers for which beer or alcohol is sold. That to me has got a lot of money. There's a bunch of other measures out there, and some of them in the public domain, some not in the public domain yet. But let's be clear on this. Unit pricing set by government is an open door for the health lobby, and let's not be in any way unclear on this. There is a very strong temperance movement out there, both in Wales and in the UK. There is both the Welsh Assembly, who are pushing for a minimum unit price, and also within Westminster, who are not currently pushing for a minimum unit price. That is coming. We are going to face that. Let's be very clear about what, as an industry and as a consumer organisation and as drinkers, members of the public, people who have access to MPs, we have a role to play, we have an ability, we have something we can do. There's lots of things going on, there's lots of things that we can do.
Have another drink.
I'm totally not in favour of minimum yield pricing, but I am in favour of finding a way for brewers to get better prices for their beer. That doesn't necessarily mean that prices on the bar have to increase.
Okay,
There's
thank you.
lots of other ways around that impenetrable problem, but there is lots going on. There's been some really useful debate this evening.
Yeah.
There's been lots of good stuff said. I noticed that the panel's been very quiet on the whole concept of discounts, and quite rightly so.
He's missed that
It's a
20
very,
minutes.
very small problem.
Okay, we'll.
Let's not get carried away on that one.
Okay, thank you. I'll take a point here, 1 point here, and then I'm going to ask the panel just to kind of give their closing statements, because we've got about sort of 5 or 6 minutes left before people have to. Well, I know my bladder's not going to last much longer than that, to be perfectly fair. And in my industry, where the government are just about to try and price cap all of my members, I'm very much a very hot topic. But I'll take you first, you sir, and then.
Simon,
Yes.
there's only one person that's actually getting a train back. So
Okay.
It's not.
All right,
I mean,
yeah.
It's not good, but it's not horrendous.
I still definitely need a pee in less than 4 minutes, however, no matter what the vagaries of travel timetables are. Sir.
Now, as a retired bootlegger,
Thank you. Thank you.
now as a retired bootlegger, I can tell you exactly what will happen with minimum pricing for alcohol. It will not lead to a huge drift back into overpriced public houses. It will lead to a massive bootlegging industry, which will not be dealing with beer because it's too bulky and difficult to shift around. It will be bootleg spirits. If you want large numbers of people going blind, suffering paralysis and everything else, then introduce a minimum price.
Bucky's.
Yeah, just to say that obviously there is a worry for this minimum price of alcohol. Everyone their own opinion on it, but from my own sort of thoughts, as a publican and as somebody from where I remember, the only place you could buy any beer when I was a child was from the pub. You couldn't buy it from the corner shop. You couldn't buy it from an off-light. It was unknown. The only place you could go, you go down the road. You can get a signature off your mother to buy a flagon for her to take home, and it was the pub. At the time, there were lots and lots and lots of pubs, but lots and lots of industry. However, it has changed, and the only thing that's current at the moment is the amount of pubs that's closing. Now, they all close one reason, and I've been a regional manager for a group of pubs, and I've watched them close one by one. And the same reasons all the time. They couldn't compete with the people who were offering the discounts, or people taking beer home. People would say, right, why have a beer? You only drink at home. This is not going to change unless there is some sort of cap where you either stop the supermarkets from selling alcohol, which is never going to happen, because after the government got shares, they say, the Breeze, Tesco's and Christ knows what, they're all millionaires, we all know that. Or the other way is, you do introduce a minimum price of alcohol. Then at least then, we have to sell at a certain price on the bar, they can't take it home, and all our brewers, and I'm a partner of brewing company myself, we get the price for that beer that is meant to be from the off. There's no other way I can see it can be done. Otherwise, pubs will continue to shut, and Tesco will make millions upon billions of what they make now. And JD Wetherspoon can carry on doing what he does.
Okay.
And we'll never change it.
Okay. Thank you. As I say, we do have to sort of kind of draw to a close, as some of us have to train, some of us have to go that way. And we did say about 4 hours, I think, when that's coming up to 6 o'clock. What I'm going to ask the panel, just to give me in about 90 seconds each, if they can. It's Christmas coming up. What's on your letter to Santa for the industry this year, please? Chris.
Oh, bloody hell. Why me first?
You're furthest away.
I think I've been doing it again for a while, so I think for me is to continue seeing what I'm seeing at the moment. At the moment, I'm seeing a big growth in customers drinking ale and beer as a whole. My sales are going up. Contrary to what's being said elsewhere, my cask sales make up a predominant part of my sale, and that is increasing as a percentage. Thankfully, the budget's been held so I can still maintain some sort of GP. But I think for me, Christmas list, brewers making especially good beer, which I can sell really easily, is always a help. Customers continue to buy beer, which is always a help. And get rid of the bloody Stoptober and dry January shite. That's just moderation. Instead of drinking really hard for 8 months of the year and having 4 dry months, how about just drink steadily?
January.
Yeah, just drink steadily. Just drink steadily. Have a couple of pints instead of 4. It's just, for me, it's just, well, I've got some customers who can't drink very much. I think it's just more of the same. The industry's growing and it's exciting and there's more stuff happening. There's more styles coming about, there's more awareness coming about, there's more education becoming for drinkers. I think we need more of the same. So yeah, that's pretty much.
Thank you. Pete?
My Christmas wish would be that we can all see the bigger picture a little bit more. Minimum pricing is a serious issue. Cameras, direction, Wetherspoons vouchers, all these things are things that need to be talked about. But beer as a whole is more exciting than it's ever been in my lifetime, even though the volume of beer being sold is in long-term decline. And the big issues for everybody in the industry, if you want to kind of see more great beer being sold and drunk and good brewers making better profits, is, as you kind of alluded to, the creeping tide of neo-prohibitionism in this country, which is being unopposed because we're all kind of worrying about the little things that are closer to us. We can see more clearly, and so we fight against those instead of the bigger, more nebulous problems, which is the fact that spirits and cocktails and wine are eating share out of beer in a declining market because people see alcohol as being bad for you when it's not. For the vast majority of people, drinking is a massively positive, influential thing on life. If it wasn't, we wouldn't be here. You know, alcohol began civilization, and alcohol has been present at most of the greatest things we've ever done as a species. We need to be kind of focusing on that and focusing on the attacks against alcohol as a whole, and protecting our rights as drinkers and our rights as drink producers, and the positives. And actually, it's becoming a dirty word to say that there are positives as a result of drinking. It's becoming, you almost can't say that to society now, and that's what we need to be focusing on.
Thank you. Julian?
It's been a very refreshing change. I hope it doesn't happen too regularly, but to actually be enjoying a moderate session in a public house where the topic of conversation hasn't been football or music or which pointless questions really taxed me this evening as I was watching it or whatever, and for us to be able to talk about the subject that binds us all together. I hope, and I suppose my letter to Santa would be, please let me carry on doing this for many years to come, enjoying the brilliant range of beers that we have, sampling the most interesting ones and slinging down my throat the ones that I find make a session come together most profitably for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Nick?
I think it's been covered with the I repeat on the prohibitionists and try and get rid of the anti-alcohol lobby out there, which are going to take away one of my big passions, which is beer. And I don't want that. But equally, I'm going to be political. I think Mr. Newby should take his finger out of his arse and start bloody implementing some market rent only options so that pubs can genuinely buy beer from you people out there who make fantastic beer.
Thank you. Jen?
What I'm most concerned with for the future, and I think it has a really important knock-on effect for the drinker, is that more people start to think of the brewing industry as a career for life, that there be people who join the industry for a proper trade. They really want to learn it through and through, and they really want to be in it long term, not just for a lark to disappoint their parents for a few years, but to genuinely be experts in their field. And that's what I think is going to make the biggest difference to the next generation of brewers and beer.
Thank you. And last and definitely not least, Wilf?
Well, peace obviously fits. You know what, I was thinking about what I was going to say, and Jen put it very eloquently. I wish I'd thought of that myself. I would also say that I'd like to think that as brewers, that people, that brewers in general should look in the mirror a great deal more than they currently do, rather than bleating about what the market's doing to them. So frequently it's about what they're doing to the market. I'd also say that consumers should stop looking at, should be more individual, should try to actually aspire to understand what they're drinking more, and if we put both of those together, we'll have better beer and we'll have better fun.
Excellent, thank you very much, and all perfectly timed. Ladies and gentlemen, as I say, I desperately do need to use the facilities, and some of the panel desperately need to get back home. I'm sure some of the rest of them will be hanging around at the bar having a few beers. Please stay and chat and talk and enjoy the wonderful range of cask beer, because Pete won't be troubling them on that score, of course. And enjoy it, and I'm sure that when we do this again, we shall see you all again. But thank you for your support. I hope it was useful, informative, and in some points, if it did get a little bit shouty, well, that's always good, because passion is always something that drives an industry. So thank you very much, everybody. And can I just say thanks, of course, to Sue for organising it, and again at getting everybody here. Thanks very much to the Hop Bunker for hosting a splendid venue, which I only discovered myself for the first time a fortnight ago, and I've been here many times since. I even delved into the chili crickets last night, and I can assure you they are very, very tasty and very protein packed. Thanks very much. Cheers.